Well, good morning, everybody. Are we all hooked up on the
We are.
thing? Well, we'll call the meeting to order. And I can see visually that we have all industrial commission members in attendance. So we'll proceed with the first item, which is the Office of Industrial Commission and Karen and Reese. First thing up is consideration approval for the September 7th minute meetings, which were distributed ahead of time. Do we have a motion to approve?
So move. Second.
A motion and a second. Any addition or corrections? Call for the vote.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Lieutenant?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes, motion carries. Next is a report on the, Karen, on the presentation of the budget section on Outdoor Heritage Fund.
Yes, thank you, Governor. And my testimony is provided for you behind tab 2. I provided the required update to the budget section of legislative management on September 21st. So the testimony is in your binders along with some supplemental information that Reese has put together. And I'll just hit a few of the highlights that we provided to the budget section. This report is really an opportunity to talk about the impact of the program, the Outdoor Heritage Fund program, the impact that it's having across the state. And so what we cover is some historical stats since inception of the Outdoor Heritage Fund, which at this point includes 22 grant rounds. We are currently in the midst of grant round 23. 224 projects that have been funded to date, and just over $81.6 million of funds awarded to these projects. And there's been a project in every county in the state. The report that we provided to budget section also shares with them the current balance in the fund, which is a little over 1.1 million, plus the appropriation for this current biennium, which is $15 million. This $15 million is appropriated from the oil and gas gross production tax formula. We also reviewed with them the 4 directives that are legislatively set forth under the program. And these directives are sports person access, agricultural stewardship, habitat enhancement, and recreation. And then we provide for them information about how much has been awarded under each one of those directives. The report provided information about the statewide impact of the program, again, projects having been funded in every county in the state, and then providing information about the current grant round 23. And in this grant round, we have 11 applications totaling $4.5 million, representing $26.1 million in project value. Those approved projects come before you on October 31st. Reese had also put together some supplemental materials showing the different projects that have been completed since the last time the report was given to budget section in the fall of last year. It was about a 10-minute report, and I did not receive any questions from the committee.
Thank you for the update. Reese, thanks for all the leadership coordination on this important program. Any questions for Karen on Outdoor Heritage Fund? Okay, moving to item C.
Thank you, Governor. For all of your development. So, you have kind of a high level of all your funds. You have a cash balance, funds that are committed amounts that you're uncommitted amounts. This is for the most part, the only exception is CC, which I obtained for you during the latest grant round that you already had this Friday. Just highlights the total of all of your projects, 560 projects. We currently have 169 loans. Cumulative value of that $8.6 billion project value. That's in the state of North Dakota, leveraging these dollars because we require that 50/50 match, but in cases, of course, the applicants provide a higher match. So that $8.6 billion value that has come because of your work in these programs. Also included, breakouts for each fund to get your their resources that are cumulative amounts for each of those as well. Only outlier right now, the gas, it's like we're open to biennium to work through. Now that the new biennium has reset, we know getting funding back into the bucket to refill it. Generally speaking, it fills at $1.5 million a month. And the legislature this session has raised the cap on this bucket to 20.5 million. But they've also given us a few legislative requirements for gas capture. So last session, we had the gas capture tax incentive that this session they converted into a grant program that will be funneled through the oil and gas research funds. Renewable, we have on page 5, breaking down where the renewable comes from. That, of course, is all oil and gas tax dollars. It's funneled through the Resources Trust Fund, $3 million of biennium. And then Outdoor Heritage Fund, which is our next upcoming grant round that we'll have this month. We have 1.1 million available for that. And then, of course, I also included CC. I note that I did not include the ARPA dollars or the loans on this one. The ARPA dollars, if you recall, the Bakken Energy project that decommitted a portion of their project that was reallocated by the legislature this session for a salt cavern project, which you'll have as an action item for your consideration later on this agenda. And the remaining 10 million is fully committed to the Liberty Hydrogen Hub. And then I've also included, just for your awareness, as scheduled for the remaining year, what we have coming up for grant rounds, what you can expect at your upcoming meetings. This month, we will have Outdoor Heritage and potentially an IHA Grid Resilience stakeholder meeting. That is also an item for consideration for you later on this agenda. Coming up in November, we will have both renewable and lignite, and then in December, potentially our Oil and Gas Research Council meeting. With that, Governor, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Reese? No. Hey, I really love the new format. Appreciate the graphics and the summaries and the sources and the calendar. I mean, the visual presentation, it really brings home a tremendous impact that all these programs the Industrial Commission has been managing or having across the state, and, driving, and again, particularly the leverage with the private sector dollars, really impressive. So great presentation. And I think, again, it highlights the important work that this commission and its staff and all its agencies are doing. Okay, next on the agenda is is there any other Industrial Commission business for under D?
Yeah, Governor, I wanted to also present the commission with just a brief overview of what the results are with the Supreme Court decision vacating the OMB bill, Senate Bill 2015, and what it means for the commission. There were 4 items related to the commission in the OMB bill that are now vacated. 2 of the items are related to CC. One was a requirement that CC fund a $125 million fertilizer incentive program. It didn't include an appropriation. It was a requirement that CC take out a loan with the Bank of North Dakota to give a loan to an entity that would produce fertilizer by electrolysis of water. And if the project were up and running, that CC would be required to forgive that loan and request an appropriation from a future legislature. So that item is now vacated. And then another item related to CC was that the Department of Commerce Development Fund was required to consult with CC if they had any project that could be related to a CC type project. So that is also now vacated. And then related to B&D, we had 2 items. One was a cash management study with B&D involvement, and one was the $100 million line of credit through B&D for the Water Infrastructure Revolving Loan Fund.
Okay, thank you for that update. Any other questions?
All good.
I'm resisting commenting on that whole all of that, but I'm sure we'll have solutions moving forward for all things in the OMB bill. I think the only of the 4 that you mentioned, the only one that probably was in the cycle right now in terms of a procurement of a contract was probably the cash management study, is what I'm thinking. So from immediate operational standpoint, the other 3, if resolved by upcoming legislative session, legislature can decide to reinstate those or not. But the one that I'm guessing has had some interruption is the cash management consulting contract. Is that right?
Depending on what happens with the state.
Yeah, we should hear that. We expect to hear it pretty quick. We filed that motion on Friday and requested 60 days in response to what the legislature felt was needed to get that in line. So I shouldn't say expect. Would certainly hope this week sometime, we hear back. So
So if it stays in place, then the procurement can continue.
Yeah.
I mean, to get
it's all status quo. And it's there now because it was stayed 30 days, we believed. It appeared that was the case, but we're asking for clarification from the court on that. It wasn't crystal clear. But yeah, everything just remains as is, and then we'll see. I expect that this week.
Okay, next up is Department of Mineral Resources, but let me say one, I will make one editorial comment. When we just heard about the $8 billion number from Rees, I think we've talked a lot in this commission about the importance of innovation, not regulation, to solving America's energy needs and solving any environmental concerns. And I think that if you're going to pick any organization in the country that has really committed itself to that, it's probably the North Dakota Industrial Commission and its agencies, because we're actually walking the talk in terms of, all the different programs that invest in R&D and invest in innovation. And we're going to get a chance to look at some of those today. But I mean, we're not just talking about it, we're actually doing it here. Okay.
Thank you.
Lynn, great to have you back, and great to see Ed. And we highlight, because this is the first time ever, the first agenda item is geologic survey.
You're in a tough spot.
The last meeting just didn't seem right though without your report, and it's the best thing that we do, the most interesting thing.
Yes. Don't take advantage of it.
Yeah. Sure. Take advantage of it. Time's yours.
If we wouldn't have our billions without our geology, so we are always happy to hear more about our geology.
If turn to page 1, the graph. So during the second quarter of this year, geologists from DMR as well as EERC and the University of North Dakota students, professors looked at over 13,600 feet of core. In the core library, we also sent almost 2,900 feet of core to the Rocky Mountain sectional meeting through American Association of Petroleum Geologists in Bismarck in June. And then we also photographed a little over 7,000 feet of core, generated close to 11,000 standard photographs. So all told, we pulled 23,500 feet of core off our shelves, which is the most that we've done in I wrote 5 years. I went back, and I guess it's actually been the last 10 years. We look at
And you couldn't break the 5-mile barrier. The core studied.
we're getting close. I mentioned about the conference. Tim Desheim, who is the head of our core library and core library manager, as well as the head of our subsurface, is also president of the RMS of AAPG. As such, he was the meeting chairman, so a lot of that fell on him. I gave him the directive to do most of that work on his own, which he did at night on weekends. But in addition to organizing the meeting, he ran a core workshop. We gave a presentation for a workshop, gave a talk. He was stretched very thin. We had several other geologists speaking at that conference. And then Levi Moxness, who's been doing a lot of the critical minerals work, and Clint Boyd set up a 2-day field trip. Clint got pulled off the last minute on a woolly mammoth dig, which he'll talk about next month. And Jeff Person jumped in and ran that. And here's a picture of Kathy Nesset giving a presentation over lunch.
And do you have a metric for what a 1 foot of core weighs?
Well, the 3-foot box, if its whole core is 30 pounds. So a standard, usually they're slabs, so it's closer to 15 pounds. So we've run the, we've run the tonnages. I don't have that straight in my mind, but at different times I've looked to see how much how many tons that we pulled on and off the shelves
But 10 to 15 pounds per foot.
per 3 feet. So it's roughly 5 pounds per foot for a slab.
Once you go through and you analyze it, you photograph it, you do all, at what point do you discard it? You're not
Oh
storing
my
it.
God. Yeah, we don't.
I'm
We
sick of
don't
this.
discard, we do not.
Yeah, we don't.
Is that why we have all these new buildings? I'd love to, I'd love to tour that.
It happened when you were
Really would.
lieutenant governor. That's when we put the.
When
new
you're the
building up.
lieutenant governor, there's not one thing on this planet that you control. I can guarantee you. So it's, talk to Jack.
I will
So
say,
at that time,
Good
it
answer.
was 2013, right?
2016.
2016. We expanded the core library to give us 50 years
Yeah, I do
of
remember that,
capacity.
but there really isn't a time where you ever feel like you analyzed it sufficiently that you've got it documented. You have to store it.
Because we never know what tests are coming down
Right,
the road,
right,
brand new
right.
tests, and we've certainly seen that, in our time.
Yeah.
But
I would love to tour that.
we did have a real quickly legislator who made that same comment towards the end of the session, which made us very nervous, that he take these really nice, high-powered, high-resolution photographs, which we're doing. And he said, once you got that, you could discard it. And within that next interim, he toured the core library and came running over to me and said, okay, I get it. So we
I have a
really
feeling I'm gonna have a
invite you
better
come.
chance of
Yes.
getting this tour than I am of going out and digging for the woolly mammoth.
Oh.
I'm only gonna ask him for 2 years. We tried through land board last week too. I said, I'm gonna find an angle, to get out there and spend a week in the summer, chip some rock.
Love to have
I can tell.
you. On page 2, on July 11th, we issued our 8th critical minerals report in the last 6 years, report investigation 134. And so if you look at that lower right on page 2, back in May, I talked to you about the Bear Den member, which is an ancient soil horizon. Now we're dropping down 1,000 feet, we're going back 6 million years more to the rain bed, which again is an ancient soil horizon. And then we jump over to, on page 2, the map, the Golden Valley Formation is, Bear Den member is the lower member of the Golden Valley Formation in brown. And then the rain bed, which I'm talking about today, is shown in white. So it extends all the way from southern Golden Valley County down through Bowman, Slope, Bowman, Adams, up through Oliver County. And then on the top of page 3, you might remember this photograph from May. I showed you this when we were talking about the Bear Den, the top photograph. Again, that white horizon is a bleached, it's a soil. And what we found, that rare earth elements are concentrated from the middle of that soil horizon. During the weathering, they got pushed down. So they're elevated in the middle of that right horizon until about 10, 15 feet down into the underlying Sentinel Butte rocks. And that's why I've got those 2 white lines. That brackets that area of elevated rare earth elements. And then the rain bed below it, you can see some similarities. They're both 15 to 20 to 30 feet thick, both occasionally dazzling white, but quite often white in color. And again, from the middle of the rain bed down 10, 15 feet into the underlying slope formation, that's where we found the elevated concentrations. Page 4, the top photograph is took with our drone, shows the rain bed. I've got an arrow pointing to it. You can see they can be traced fairly well. We're looking east, northeast to Fully Butte in the distance. And then the underlying photograph is an example of where the rain bed can be very difficult to trace. Here, instead of being white, it's more turquoise, greenish blue. And when you look at that photograph and go both to left and right, you can see it literally pinches out. This is one of those, this is in Logging Camp Ranch. You can't really tell from this photograph, but you can literally put the state capitol right there. And there's another 45 feet of rock above that.
What's the mining process like though? I mean, you access this, it's mid-tier in the picture there. You know, how do you access it? How do you, I mean, without destroying?
And that's a good question. We were in here since 2015. We concentrated primarily along the Little Missouri River because the outcrops are so good. But to go in and mine in these areas would be very difficult. So that leads to the drilling program that we're going to be doing, where we're going to be moving out into more of the flatter areas and then trying to get shallower, hopefully where we can intercept these within 50 feet of the surface. So that reduces your mining costs if you can find an area that's economic to mine. Then on page 5, you saw the Bear Den profile. I presented that in May. Again, you can see the white that's colored there, that sort of horizon. And then we place it next to the rain bed. And so the concentrations for earth are in the orange dots. You may remember from before where they just really jump out. And that, again, that middle of that leach zone down into the underlying rocks. We see the same thing with the rain bed, although there's a couple instances above that. One, the Harmon bed, which is unique situation there in one locality at Logging Camp Ranch. And then there's a little area, there's a thin pool between the rain bed and the Harmon bed, literally right behind the Hanson Ranch House, where we've got some high numbers. And then below that, just as I showed the exact same critical minerals for when we're looking at the Bear Den, here it's rain bed, showing that they don't have the same unique profile. They're not moved by acidic waters to the rate that the rare earth minerals are. They're still elevated, the gallium, germanium, vanadium, cobalt, lithium, molybdenum, which is not a critical mineral, but still important. We do find these elevated, but we find them elevated at different times throughout the section. Then on page 6, the upper 2 photographs are one site, and then the 2 photographs on the bottom are within 400 feet of each other at a site. What was different, and you may recall over the years, we've talked about how 90% of our sites contained elevated rare earth concentrations, but it was usually just the top couple inches of a coal. Here, you can see the numbers as you run through in these profiles. And again, 300 parts per million is what the Department of Energy has said is the threshold for economic concentrations in lignite or in coal. In lignite, research done by the University of North Dakota shown that number is probably going to be significantly lower. But here we've got very high numbers where we're averaging within essentially a 2-foot coal, we're averaging close to 1,000 ppm in several cases, and in some cases over that, closer to 1,200. The map on page 7, Logging Camp Ranch, was a big focus of this study, because right away in section 16, which is in the middle left part of the photograph, that's where we mined the 44 tons. We assisted the Institute of Energy Studies up at UND January 2020. And then all the everything shown with green dots is over that 300 parts per million concentration. The white dots are areas where we found coals, but we could not find these same rain bed coals that we were looking for. Between erosion from Little Missouri, Sand Creek, and Deep Creek, the coal was gone. In other cases, there was a sand channel that came through at that time, 61 million, 62 million years ago, and took out that coal.
It's exciting, to hear all this, but it's not at all difficult to imagine the concern about accessing, mining, extracting these minerals, is it? It's going to be, it doesn't seem like you're having an open pit mine just keep going down. Like you're going to be going horizontally, and there's going to be a significant disruption, is a nice way to say it, of the entire landscape, wherever it's being accessed.
And again, Attorney General, if we get into.
Nothing critical of it, I'm just pointing out that, we have to anticipate that, it's obvious.
We get more into the kind of rolling prairie. And again, because we've got a large area, again, just focusing on the rain bed where, again, that swath all the way through Dakota, that we can find areas where it won't be as disruptive. Certainly, this would be pretty disruptive in this area.
But you're starting here, you just got the whole strata exposed, so you just literally walk right up to a cliff face, take the samples in a super easy way, but those things may extend for tens, hundreds of miles out. And so then you can go out someplace else and actually do the activity. And you're saying that in some places, they might even be closer to the surface than they are on these exposed cliffs.
Correct, and that's where we'll be drilling at, is we're gonna get into the more rolling topography and then trace the beds through there.
Mhm.
And one of the problems, I mean, so one of the real accomplishments so far is we've taken this 1,800-foot block of rocks, coal-bearing rocks, and where we were, for this 8 years, we were going through that entire section. Now we've got 2 30-foot sections that we're concentrating on. So that's the positive side. The negative side now is trying to find coal within 2 30-foot sections. And when you're looking at, you can go out in any township in North Dakota and you're standing there and you've probably got up to 14 coals underneath you total. And with an average thickness of 4 feet, which is probably less because we can't see some of the really thin coals on electric logs. And so we're still back to the needle in a haystack in many ways. Before, the needle in the haystack was the 1,800 feet. Now it's finding coals within those 2 30-foot sections. Then over on page 8, just kind of as literally as filler for the covers of our reports. But as long as we're talking about these 2 ancient soil profiles, I did want to talk about Silkreed. In fact, I brought these. I'm hoping we don't scratch the table, but
We're not going to break this.
yeah. So that is a silica-rich rock. It's a duracrust. Again, it's formed during this soil profile. And so you had quartz grains that were cemented by silica-rich mud in many cases. And it's not a good example there because it's so small, but quite often we find molds of stems, of limbs and tree limbs. And then also a reed which has nodes on it, which looks very much like horsetail or equisetum. And I've got an example, photograph that on page 9. So as an example of the durability, the photograph on page 9 in Adams County, at the top of Pearl Buttes, and that's those pieces are pieces of Silkreed there from the Barradin member. And then I've got an arrow pointing to the south there. That's the rain bed. There's 200-foot difference there. There should be 1,000 feet. So what's happened over tens of millions of years is all the rocks between that 800 feet has eroded, and that Silkreed has just kept dropping down. So we see that throughout. We call it float because it's out of place, but it's in the regular, close to the position of where it was deposited. And that's why you find that throughout western North Dakota in areas where you could never ride a horse across it. There's just too many rocks. It's very difficult even to walk.
Serving on the Industrial Commission has answered the question I had when I was in college. Why would somebody major in geology? It's fascinating. It is. It's fascinating.
So on top of page 10, here's a pretty good sized rock pile of Silkreed that the farmer has work in his field. So I mentioned before, we've been working with the architects with the Theodore Roosevelt Library. And one of the things they've talked about is they've been looking for rocks to use in landscaping. And I said, be sure to incorporate Silkreed because it'll never break down. You don't have to worry about that. And then they also asked for some pictures of stone buildings in western North Dakota so they could get an idea of, if they wanted to incorporate that. And here's 2 examples. The one on page 10 is along Highway 22 north of New England. The other on top of 11 is south of the town of Oak Valley, Mercer County.
How old do you think those are, those buildings?
100. Yeah, I would say early 1900s. So moving on then to regulatory, during the second quarter, we issued 1 subsurface mineral permit, 8 geothermal permits, 6 residential, 2 commercial, 4 paleontological resource program permits. For publications, put out the 3 maps in the Fargo area, wind-blown sand resource map in the Hazen area, 56 landslide maps, a couple of reports from our paleontologists. And then on page 14, for presentations, again, the majority were tours of the mummified Hadrosaur Dakota, as well as paleontology lab and the collections, the state fossil collection. Also, a couple of these tours were given to Wachter and Assembly 6th graders, Montpelier High School. Again, we're trying to reach these younger kids, getting them interested in science, and we're going out to 8th grade science class at Wachter with a geologist and a paleontologist, because paleontologists were taking a Becky Barnes, so we've got a man and a woman to get the kids, especially the girls, interested in science. Gave talk to NDSU geology department, which I'm sad to say is closing. We made that decision back in February and wrote to the president and said I thought it was kind of short-sighted, because by 2030 we're going to have a huge shortfall in geoscientists, as with almost all scientists and engineers. We've got to get these kids going into the STEM fields. It's also speak to the MSU Moorhead Geology Department and Archaeology Department. Gave 2 talks up at the Wilson Basin Petroleum Conference in Regina. That's coming back now in 2024 to Bismarck. And again, just out of all these, also want to point out the very last one that one of our geologists gave a presentation on topographic maps to 6th to 9th graders this summer through the Gateway to Science.
These, I don't want to give everybody an idea out there in DC, but is there much, when you're looking at these permits issued in this time frame, April, June, is there federal permitting required as well? Or is it all, what's that look like? The regulatory regimen?
It depends if there's, of course, if there's federal land involved for the.
Just depends where the land is,
Yeah.
but there's not like that, okay.
And so the subsurface mineral permit, there, as far as I know, there was not. That was in northwestern Morton County. Paleontological, there may be, that's on primarily on state lands. So again, that's a separate one. And geothermal for these closed loop shallow systems, again, I'm not aware of any. We haven't any interaction with the feds on that.
Sorry, I mentioned
You're more to
it.
come.
Maybe nobody's listening.
Ed, anything you want to add on the woolly mammoth?
I'll, that we were actually, Governor, waiting for the company that was on their property to do a press release. And then a press release came out 3 weeks ago through the Commerce Department, I think was involved. That's this group that's come in. They were given $3 million. I forget which fund that came out of, where they want to clone woolly mammoths. And so they came into our lab to look at the material that we've got. But I'm hoping by November 28th that Clint can speak more freely about that.
We didn't scratch the rock, did we?
I was more worried about the table. So
That surprises me as a geologist. Yes, worried about his rock. Any other questions for Ed on the survey? So,
Thanks, Ed.
And tell your team thank you, and obviously the work on the critical minerals is really essential. I mean, not just the North Dakota's future, but the whole debate about how we're going to be powering the world going forward. And so I really appreciate the work that everybody's doing.
Thank you. I could mention that if it's in our report that was going through, is that, you know, the goal when we first started out was find a 5-foot thick coal that contained 300 parts per million. That's always been our goal. But as we find these 2-foot coals, they actually contain more rare earths than a 5-foot 300. So then if you're mining this in an area away from a coal mine and then hauling it, then you're better off with less material with a higher concentration. So we'll see where that goes. If you mine 2-foot coal over a quarter of a section, that's 560,000 tons of coal. But again, you're disturbing a lot of, even if you're in relatively flat topography, you're disturbing a lot of material.
Have to innovate on ways to get the minerals out.
Yeah, so there, in answer to your question, Attorney General, ERC is doing a lot of research on extraction and better ways to extract. In China, they just dig a big hole
Sure.
and dig up all that clay and leave spoil piles and acid leach pools and all of that.
Yeah.
That's not what we intend to do in Western.
Well, we know that won't be the way it'd be done here. We want to do it that way and no one would tolerate it being done that way. And I'm glad to hear that there's already, not surprised, that they're looking into ways for less disruption in the extraction. The extraction is important. I mean, obviously.
One thing that we're most hopeful about is the possibility of solution mining, just through a well field with no open pit at all. So, and those coals have permeability, so you can move water through them. So.
Interesting.
One thing, this is, for once, this is a real advantage having lignite because it's much easier to remove these critical minerals from these soft coals than it is from a subbituminous anthracite.
And Lynn mentioned China, but China's not just tearing up their own country. I mean, Indonesia and Africa, where they're doing these incredible large, giant open pit, sometimes child labor, no EPA. And then those minerals go to China, then they make a battery in a plant that's powered by coal, and then it's sent to America where we subsidize it with taxpayer dollars.
We hope to break that cycle.
Yes.
It's not like our clean coal technology here that we developed.
No, exactly. Because they're building a plant a week right now, but it's, 1970s technology, not 2023 North Dakota clean coal.
All right, thanks, Ed. So moving on to B, I think this is probably the largest number of, well, no, I don't think. In 25 years, I've never brought 14 orders to the commission before. So I'll apologize in advance for that, but it's just the timing of all of this and some of these, it's really important that these move forward and decisions need to be made. And so many of them, you can't delegate, you have to make the decision. The first one, item I, this is case 29227. We're bringing you order 31794. I've got some slides to walk through. This case comes to us from district court. A company called Vitesse sued Hess in district court over costs being charged to them on wells that they're a non-operated working interest owner in. On the map up there, you can see the gray areas. Those are the spacing units. This is very much a precedent-setting case, and it's very large. There are 800 wells in those gray spacing units that Hess operates, that Vitesse is a non-operated working interest owner in. All of those have been spaced by you and pooled by you. And under spacing and pooling law in North Dakota, the Industrial Commission has the jurisdiction to determine actual and reasonable costs for drilling and operation of a well on a pooled spacing unit. And so what this case comes to us for is the judge has determined that the Industrial Commission does not have cradle to grave jurisdiction over crude oil all the way from the reservoir to the product being dispensed, say at a gas station or coming out of a refinery. And so he's asking you to determine what you have jurisdiction over and what should be determined by the court. And a major disagreement between Vitesse and Hess. they acknowledge, and there's a list in the order on page 4 of the costs that are in dispute in front of you. They provided, each provided a list. They weren't exactly alike, but very, very similar. So we laid them out in the findings in the order. Hess argues that all these costs are associated, even though they're post-production costs, they're necessary for producing oil and gas from a well, and therefore they would fall under the commission jurisdiction of cost to operate a well. So your jurisdiction and authority are laid out in 380804. We went through the definitions of gas and oil and product, authority to pool, pooling orders, what they do, what it means, the operation of a well. I should note this next map is just the gas. So what you can see there is the tariff areas that Hess uses. That's what's in the green or in the blue outline, and then how they potentially impact Vitesse's holdings where they are non-operated working interest owners. This then shows you the value chain that Hess is saying everything from the drilling rig over there through to the downstream side, the blue side, is necessary for the operation of the well and therefore should fall under your jurisdiction to determine actual reasonable costs. We spent a lot of time digging through thousands and thousands of pages of depositions and discovery, and I think the hearing went for 2.5 days in front of my staff, and a lot of time processing all of that. We made the determination that it isn't the physical location of where costs are incurred, where they're necessarily paid. It's the physical location where they occur, meaning spacing unit, well pad, things associated with that. And our regulations, the statutes and rules that you have lay out a very clear point at which that jurisdiction ends. And I've marked that. That's what this order says. I've marked that on the diagram above. For water at the bottom, you do have cradle to grave from the reservoir all the way to the disposal reservoir. So that absolutely is under commission jurisdiction all the way through. And it would be up to you in a dispute to determine actual reasonable costs for that stream. However, for oil and natural gas, we believe that your jurisdiction ends at the meter, which measures the oil that's now marketable and the gas that's now able to move to a processing plant, that it ends at that meter, at that central tank battery, and that everything downstream of that, the gathering system, the processing, the refining, the trucking, the transportation pipelines, all of those are post-production costs. They don't fall under commission jurisdiction for the determination of actual reasonable costs. And so those post-production costs, whether they're fair, reasonable, actual, whether there's a case, those would fall to the district court. And so this order answers the judge's question in a situation where the commission does not have cradle to grave jurisdiction for oil and gas. Where does this jurisdiction end over actual reasonable costs? And it's pretty clear from the statutes and regulations that it ends at that lease automatic custody transfer meter, or when the tank is gauged and it moves through a Getty box onto a truck, or when it passes through that gas meter and enters a gathering pipeline, compressor facility, and processing facility. So that's what this order does. This impacts everybody associated with the oil and gas industry. Post-production costs, of course, are charged against the revenue on royalty statements. And so you're familiar with that from the land board and everything that's gone on there. So this determination provides that bright line to say, these are operating costs. They should be on a joint interest billing. These are post-production costs, and they should be revenue deductions and determined by the courts.
So Lynn, in that situation, is it being perceived because it's in the chapter where we have so many other things that when you start talking about processing, start talking about gathering lines, because they're in that chapter, they think that we have authority over them?
That's partially true, Commissioner. Because you have jurisdiction over the safety
Yeah.
and leak prevention and detection of those underground gathering pipelines, that you would have jurisdiction over
Over the
the
rest of
charges
them, yeah.
associated with operating them. But that does not make them actual reasonable costs for operation of a well on a spacing unit. Also, because you have gas capture regulations and
Yeah.
policies in place and an order, there was the argument made that you're making them put in this infrastructure and capture the gas and process it. Therefore, you should have jurisdiction over all the costs of doing that. But that falls under preventing waste and protecting correlative rights. It doesn't fall under the cost of drilling and operation of a well
The authority.
on a pooled spacing unit. So this is the best way to provide industry a bright line test of what's drilling and operating costs and what is post-production costs.
And give us the history of how this particular case brought us to this proposed resolution, given that this has been debated, roughly. I mean, post-production costs, you mentioned land board, that's been going on for years and years and years and years, contractually and in the courts. How is this different that it is come back to the Industrial Commission, and are there other precedent setting, as you said, this sets precedent, but were there other cases that help guide your recommendation here about where you place the bright line?
Yeah, thank you, Governor. And I may have to call on our Assistant AG to talk about some of that, but there is a section of your order that talks about the procedure of how we got here, and then also the conclusions of law. And there's a long history dating back to 1969 about the commission's jurisdiction to pool and to determine drilling and operation costs on wells and to settle disputes. So 1969 all the way up through about 2014, there were a number of cases that dealt with that, and where commission acted, and then it was appealed to court, and the Supreme Court found that the commission did have that jurisdiction. In this case, post-production costs changed dramatically in about 2015, because in 2014, 36% of the natural gas in North Dakota was being flared. The commission took action to end that with a commission order and a gas capture policy. That resulted in billions of dollars of investment in gas capture infrastructure. And the operators of that infrastructure are charging back a lot of those costs, capital costs, construction costs, operating costs, to non-operated working interest owners and to royalty owners. And so the build out of infrastructure from 2015 through 2022 is what brings this case to the district court and causes the court to say, all right, I know you don't have cradle to grave jurisdiction over what happens with the oil and gas. Where is your jurisdiction? You need to make that determination for me, and then I'll move forward on the part that's under my jurisdiction. So that's basically what brought us here.
So I'd have one more question before we go to Matt. This seems to be more of an issue with this company than other companies that I'm aware of. Is there something different that they're doing that other companies aren't? Did they have higher costs initially that other companies don't? Or what changed the dynamics? Because this is something I hear from royalty owners quite often.
Yeah, thank you. And the situation is quite different for this particular operator. This operator constructed all of that infrastructure that you see there, and they did so under a different corporate structure than most people. Most of the oil and gas operators in North Dakota give their gas or oil to a third party, and it gets transported out of the state, or it gets processed within the state and transported out by a third party. Hess built a corporate structure in which and it's laid out in the order. Hess Corporation has Hess Midstream, Hess Trading and Transportation, and all of these they're fully owned subsidiaries that built this infrastructure, operate this infrastructure, and charge Hess Bakken Investment those costs, who operates the well. So a different structure. Also, in order to finance this massive amount of infrastructure, they sold a large portion of it to the venture capital markets, and even went public with some of it. And there was a lot of discussion about whether the return on investment guarantees that were provided in those sales and transactions are what's driving it. We quickly made the determination that that's outside our jurisdiction. We
Yeah.
didn't need to dig into it, but the judge certainly will have to. So yes, this is a different structure than
Than all
most
the
of what
rest.
we see
Yeah,
in North Dakota.
that explains it.
It's the same physical infrastructure. It's just the ownership is different because it's internal wholly owned subs that may have had financial investors, outside financial investors, versus having a third party like a One Oak or someone else who's also invested billions. And there's been, I'm sure, large hundreds of millions, if not billions, invested in this infrastructure as well. And without that, we wouldn't have a record high gas capture that we're experiencing right now.
That's correct, Governor. We wouldn't be north of 96% gas capture without that kind of investment. And so it'll be interesting to watch the court sort out what's reasonable there and what can be built back and what can't. But it's really a pretty simple decision for you all as to where we think your jurisdiction ends on these two items.
Matt?
I agree.
Governor, I was a hearing, actually, I wasn't hearing officer in this case. It was Steve Nelson, my predecessor. So there's been a couple of assistant attorneys generals that had contributed to this case. But one thing that the hearings on these matters make clear is that there's a simple hard point to cut off the commission's jurisdiction, but the testimony in these hearings reflects a very complex, like what you said, financial investments in infrastructure that just, once you start hearing the testimony and it's expert testimony, how complex it is, it really reflects many issues that go far beyond, and subject matter that goes far beyond the expertise of DMR engineering staff. It's like you said, financial issues, investment issues, pipeline infrastructure, and but the hard point on the illustration reflects a really good regulatory spot where you can establish end of operations for the purposes of jurisdiction in this analysis.
And Lynn, to be specific, we're responding to a request from a judge for us to come back and basically say, place the bright lines on the map and tell us where your authority ends or doesn't. And that was the exercise that we're asking, because this case continues between the plaintiff and the defendant in the court. We were just asked for our viewpoint on this, correct?
That's correct. At this stage of the game, I would not be surprised if a case comes back before you to actually look at what's actual and reasonable in terms of the cost being charged to the left of those red lines. And in fact, we heard a case recently about charges on that water infrastructure down there that we'll be bringing to you. But yeah, the bulk of this digging into all the financials and structures and all of that will be the purview of the courts. And that's the determination you're making at this point is everything to the right of the line, the red marks there on the oil and gas streams is something for the district court, for the industrial commission.
District court to determine what is a reasonable cost or not.
Correct.
So I don't have a specific order in front of me with a recommendation. I looked through here. What is the recommendation?
So the recommendation is that this order lays out for the judge the fact that all of the costs at dispute in this case are post-production costs and are therefore not under the Industrial Commission's jurisdiction, and that on the water system, the commission does have cradle to grave jurisdiction, but on oil and gas, that jurisdiction ends at the sales meter at the tank battery.
Second.
And Lynn, the beauty of that location is that it aligns with state law and with our admin rules. And it also is entirely and totally measurable and indisputable because as you've described, the bright line is a meter and a transfer point. And so if we were to get hauled back into what costs were above or below the meter, we wouldn't be guesswork. We'd actually be able to very definitively say what costs would have occurred before and after that transaction point.
Excellent summary. Yep.
Okay. All right. And we have the, again, as Doug said, not having the motion that you're seeking is to approve.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We have a motion to approve and we have a second. Any other comments or questions? Call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor.
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you. The next few orders, but I think we want to take them one at a time, deal with the DCC West carbon storage project. It's for geologic storage of carbon dioxide. This first map shows you the area that we're talking about. It's almost 30,000 acres. So it's a very large area. And so we were asked to approve the storage facility in this order. In the next order, you're being asked to amalgamate the pore space within that storage facility, and then finally to approve the financial assurance. So there were a number of entities that opposed this storage facility. They are surface owners, and in the testimony, as well as within the order, the response to their opposition is thoroughly vetted and laid out. The applicant, DCC West, responded to all of the questions and concerns of the mineral owners or the surface owners. For example, one owner, Hosel, said it's premature to implement a massive project like this. They didn't think a good faith effort was made to lease them. All the records, everything was put in the record about how they were contacted, and commission concluded a good faith effort was made. Ms. Weaver with the Amarillo National Bank opposed it because it might reduce the value of their clients' minerals underneath the storage facility. And so that was, there's no producible or valuable minerals within the storage reservoir, and no evidence that there are any under or around the storage reservoir. Dakota Resources Council asked that you not do this because of the Northwest landowners pending lawsuit. Also concerned that pore space owners that haven't signed leases, how are they going to be compensated? It was clear in the record that they're going to be equitably compensated just like those who have signed leases. And that pretty much covers the opposition. We concluded that the pore space is not hydrocarbon bearing, that it is suitable and appropriate for the storage of carbon dioxide. that it's going to provide flexibility to store more carbon dioxide from the Milton Young Station. I should point out, it's going to be potentially 6.1 million metric tons a year for 20 years, 123 million metric tons. This will more than double what you've already permitted in the state in terms of carbon dioxide storage. So to date, you've permitted 100 million tons. This will add 123 million to that number. So it's very
got
big.
about 120 million would have about an gross economic value of about $1 billion under current.
Correct. Yeah, just in 45Q credits.
When you say that it's not hydrocarbon bearing, is that definitive? I mean, it's complete, or is that just economic?
No, absolutely. It's been cored and logged and tested, and there's no hydrocarbon in the storage reservoir at all.
Or below it.
Or below it.
And what's the depth and what's the geologic formation this is in?
See if I think I have, there we go. So the geologic formation is below 5,000 feet. You're looking at here the stratigraphic column. The storage will be in the Broom Creek formation. I don't know that my cursor, but you can see the storage reservoir with the arrow there. Lower confining zone is the Tyler and Amsden. The upper confining zone is the Picard formation in the Opeechee. And so along with determining that the storage reservoir, the Broom Creek, is suitable, we also were able to determine from cores and geologic analysis that the upper and lower confining zones will keep the CO2 in the reservoir. There are no faults or fractures in those zones that would allow the CO2 to leak out. There are no vertical wellbore penetrations through the storage facility that would be potential leak pathways. The proposed flow lines will be entirely within the storage facility. The material that we're going to store is 96 to 98% carbon dioxide, so it's a suitable material. On top of that, you can see the drinking water formation up there, the Fox Hills. There is roughly 3,600 feet of geologic zones, shales, and sandstones between the lowest drinking water aquifer and the storage reservoir. Also, you can see the Iniquara up there, and that is an under-pressured formation in this area. So any upward leak would be captured in the Iniquara, and we'll be monitoring that as we go along. Wells are going to be equipped with detection technology. Induced seismicity, not a concern. And I guess that's everything I wanted to say about it. We are recommending the approval of DCC West storage facility based on what we talked about there.
So is there any third party that's using this, or is this for our coal-fired electric generation facilities?
This is an application of a coal-fired facility. That one of the things that I should have pointed that out. Thank you for asking that, Commissioner. There are two items in this order that are new. One is that there's the potential for new carbon dioxide sources to be brought into this facility. And so we've implemented a data sharing program to make sure that DCC East and DCC West communicate along with any third parties that might bring CO2 into this storage facility. And also that if CO2 comes here from out of state, the fees would need to be determined at hearing. Right now, that's not the plan, but we know that, for example, Red Trail has been approached about expanding and bringing in new sources into their storage facility. And that's an option under our rules and regulations. So
It would still go through us, though.
it would still go through you. Yep.
So when we started down this this road in 2009, this is specifically what we were trying to do. We were trying to address issues for our coal-fired electric generation facilities and create opportunities for enhanced oil recovery. Grant you probably on the front end of this, now the way it's all structured, they'll likely participate in the Q45. And then after all their debt is serviced and their capital expenses are paid for, then we'll probably have access to most of that, I would think. But it all depends on, there's some other things that have to get worked out there. But this is exactly why we started down this road and sought primacy for Class 6 injection wells. It's for our generation facilities.
Correct.
And I guess based on that, and I know some may not necessarily understand that's where we started from. I think they're getting caught up in the rhetoric around some other things. But I would move it.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? And this is for the first of the three,
Correct.
and we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
Then the second order, 30123, I'm sorry, that's the case number. The order is 32807, deals with the amalgamation. And so as you know, under your statute, you've got the authority to amalgamate unleased pore space owners. And so as of June 30th, the number out of the, they're a little hard to read up there, the total acres is 29,775 and some loose change. The leased acres is 23,921, or 80.34% have signed a lease. So the amalgamation would put them together in the storage facility, along with the roughly 19% that at that time hadn't been leased. But I know that leasing negotiations were ongoing. And the reason we determined that people were being treated equitably is that the best terms that end up being negotiated are going to be applied to everyone.
That's good.
Everybody in the 29,800 acres is going to get the same treatment, the same lease terms, payments, and be treated equitably, whether they're way on the outside edge and the only thing you'll ever see is some 3D seismic, or whether they're in and around the injection facilities.
They'll get paid the same.
Lynn, we have a motion.
Second.
Lynn, how many injection wells are proposed?
In this case, I believe there are 2 injection wells proposed.
And you're talking close to 50 square miles?
Yes, sir.
So people could be 5 or 6 miles away from an injection well and still get mailbox money.
Correct. This has so much value for our North Dakota farmers and ranchers. It's hard to even imagine. So as you talked about, Governor, we're talking about $1 billion of 45Q credits here. That's going to be
For
shared
this one storage area.
for one storage area, and that's going to be sent out as mailbox money, a large portion of that, to those surface owners.
I don't think that's a big deal, but I think what we're doing on behalf of the state with respect to energy, our ability to save and produce that infrastructure, support the economy, and all those things that we derive value from, probably have a lot more value than a few farmers that are probably going to say, we don't care about the money. But yeah.
And I would agree, Commissioner. The big driver here is that our lignite industry needs this technology and needs its application in order to continue into the future. Otherwise, those plants are going to be shut down in the next decade.
Yep.
Well, and it's not just our industry, we're fighting the fight here to stabilize the grid and have grid resiliency when everybody else in the nation appears to be determined to make sure that we have a destabilize our grid.
And they seem to be a bit short-sighted in other places and not understand that.
Yeah. And I think the other piece, which is yet to come, is when we started down this path, is people didn't foresee the potential for manufacturing, including pig iron processing, steel manufacturing, the kinds of industry we've never been able to attract now because of these kinds of actions put us in the front row seat for attracting billions of dollars of industry to North Dakota, where people can have low carbon intensive products like steel that there's, big global demand for. So this is setting up for us to have the best attraction of economic development we've ever had. If you just look at the numbers, I mean, that's why we got the 40 billion that Commerce is tracking of potential capital investment in the state is all tied back to well, and again, including the foresight of the legislature to define in law that it was the landowner that owns the pore space. That's why we're seeing the pooling numbers that we're seeing in terms of participation. We'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
Thank you. The third case then, order 32808, case 30124 is for the financial assurance. And I just have a graphic here to show how this is intended to be laid out for DCC West through a combination of trust funds, surety bonds, and commercial insurance. So what this order does is it lays out that the plugging and infrastructure reclamation portion of this, $2.2 million will come from a trust fund that's financed by DCC West. The post-injection site care, which is that 10-year period after injection stops before the state takes responsibility, will be covered by $13.6 million in a trust fund that will be financed over a period of years leading up to that by DCC West. And then finally, emergency and remedial response, since that starts right away with the potential injection, that'll be $14.3 million through third-party insurance. So it's a combination of those. It's all laid out in the order, how those all dovetail together. But those are the three financial assurance pieces that are required by the statutes and regulations for your Class 6 primacy. The plugging and reclamation through a trust fund, post-injection site care and closure through a trust fund, and then emergency and remedial response if needed through third-party insurance policy. And those are all in place. So move.
Second.
Motion and second. Regarding order 32808 related to financial responsibility of geologic storage for DCC. Call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor.
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on then, get to some oil and gas. Order 32817, case 30207. This is a case where Oasis has applied for two 1,600-acre spacing units. You can see they're right along Highway 85 in Indian Hill area. And so they made application to the commission. You can see maybe I should point out, no, this is good. So moving to this, they were questioned as to why they would want to lay these out the way they did. There are no topographic reasons for these 1,600-acre laydowns. There are no infrastructure reasons for spacing it this way. There's no geology reasons for the proposed spacing units. The geology is just plain vanilla in the Bakken and Three Forks here. The current spacing shakes out like this. There are three north-south 1280s. Spacing unit A is operated by XTO. It's half developed. Spacing unit B and C are operated by Oasis. B has one well in it and C has two wells in it and half of it's partially developed. When you look at what would happen, here's what the 1,600-acre spacing units would look like. We questioned whether this is protective of correlative rights because the owners in the east half of the two sections on the west there, I believe it is 14 and 23. The owners in the west half of that have shared their production with the owners in the east half. But now they'll get nothing from the production from these 1600s, or potentially highly diluted revenue as a result of it being shared with two sections to the east. The owners in the east half have shared, and now they're going to get a diluted share of what comes from these 1600s. The whole purpose, as stated by Oasis, is that the economics of these 2.5 mile wells are better than the economics of the 2 mile wells to drill it out on its current pattern. Both cases are highly economic at today's oil price. We're asking you to deny this. It does not protect correlative rights. And when you look at the total production, yes, the 2.5 mile wells have a little bit better estimated ultimate recovery, but 10 wells on this spacing pattern are expected to produce 6.3 million barrels, whereas 8 wells on this pattern will produce 6 million barrels. So we're potentially leaving 300,000 barrels of oil behind, and we're not protecting correlative rights under this proposal. So we're asking you to deny it.
So just a few questions for clarification. If we remove the economics piece from everyone in the picture, but we talked about the current infrastructure that's there, wouldn't those current wells need to be plugged? Because we'd be drilling right through them, and you might have some communication issues. You would have multiple things that I think that I know of, that I believe would be a problem. And you're right, correlative rights is the big one that we really can't violate, but there's just so many things with this plan. And as much as I appreciate Oasis and all that they do, this seems a little self-serving.
So in answer to your question, Commissioner, the wells wouldn't have to be permanently plugged, but they would have to be frac protected,
Yeah,
which means temporarily plugged for probably 6 to 9 months while the drilling and hydraulic fracturing of the new 8 wells took place. So yeah, there's a big revenue impact to the existing wells. But of course, our job is prevent waste and protect correlative rights, and this does neither. So it's purely a self-serving, better economics proposal. It also, when we're talking about infrastructure, there's no infrastructure on the east side of these proposed 1600s to actually
to hook up
to gas or anything. It'll all have to be built. Whereas there is existing infrastructure across the north end of all those spacing units because they've already been drilled.
Sure.
So there's gas pipelines and everything there. So again, it's not for infrastructure. It's not for topography. It's not for geology. It's for better economics, higher IP rates, and per well recovery. But in the total picture, less ultimate recovery.
Yes.
And not protecting the rights of the owners that signed up and were pooled
And maybe
to develop those spacing units.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion to deny. Lynn, understand everything you said. Will we be seeing more of this now that I think I saw that 3/4 of our new applications are 3 mile laterals or longer, that people are going to be looking for like white spots on the map that haven't been drilled and trying to get creative on proposing new spacing units because of the economics are better for them to have longer horizontal sections. So I mean, this could be the first of many of these that start coming at you.
Governor, I believe so. And we're going to have to do the work to make sure they protect correlative rights. Now, most of what we're seeing is the 3 mile laterals are being placed parallel to the existing 2 mile laterals. So you're able to protect the correlative rights, keep those people whole, and and not carve out half sections and have them get diluted from 50% of of that development down to about 25%.
I see there's some white space to the north of this too, so maybe you can steer them back towards some 3-mile laterals in the north-south.
And I think this order will provide a lot of guidance,
Yeah.
as to what companies should and should not be bringing to you.
Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor.
Yes, so order denied. With that positive vote. Okay, motion carried, order denied. Okay, 32-823, Lynn.
Okay, we're going to take, if it's okay with you, we'll take the next 4 all as one. They're all for the confiscation of equipment and oil at 4 wells operated by a company called Norton Fricky. We have a consent agreement with them that says we should confiscate their bond and confiscate their wells, plug the wells and reclaim them. And they'll pay, in addition to that, a $293,000 penalty. So this is an ongoing thing. Mr. Fricky is deceased, and so this is dealing with his estate and his heirs. They want to get out of the oil business, and they certainly should be out of the oil business in North Dakota. So we'll also be looking at these as we move forward to make sure that if the grazing associations want them, they're plugged in a way that can happen. But this would confiscate 4 wells, all operated by Norton Fricky. We put them in separate orders because we found out lumping, sometimes things come up that didn't come out at the hearing about a particular well or some infrastructure or something like that. So 4 separate orders, but all the same period.
What do you do with the confiscated equipment?
Excuse me?
What do you do with the confiscated equipment?
We sell it. And so, for example, on a well that we're working on.
What's that?
Want to buy some pipe?
Mine?
Yeah, I was just at my brother-in-law's house in Spearfish, and I said, what's this railing on your deck made out of? And it's old sucker rod. Came out of the CARES Act program, as did a lot of the fence. It was old tubing.
Yep.
So
I mean, I guess I figured
it's
it
highly
was sold,
useful.
but what's the process? Is there like any other, almost like a sheriff's sale? There's a notification and.
We typically do a sheriff's sale. That's what we did with the CARES Act
Okay.
equipment. And in one other case, there's a well that has some pretty good equipment on it, and an offer has been made by an individual who was an investor in that company, but operates under some other companies to purchase the equipment for $10,000 to $15,000.
Where do the dollars go from those sales?
They all go into the abandoned well fund, which then is used to reclaim and
Yeah,
clean up
makes sense.
problem wells.
Interesting. Thanks.
So I will move all 4 orders.
Second.
And Lynn, that's 32823 through 32826.
Correct.
Okay, we got
823, 824, 825, 826.
a motion for all 4 the motions to approve. And we have a second, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor.
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Well, that was a copy of the consent agreement. This is
Thanks.
order number 32860 would terminate the Northeast Foothills Madison unit in Burke County. Just want to point out, all the mineral owners that testified or submitted documents support the dissolution of the unit. There were no objections. We're going to keep the bonds in place until we're happy that vegetation has been restored. There's been no production since December of 2014. And all of the unit wells have been plugged and abandoned and reclaimed. We're just waiting for vegetation growth. So it's time to terminate the unit. People complain a lot that we put these units in place and never get rid of them. Not true.
Well, the law never allowed us to until recently,
Yes.
where it puts some timelines. So move.
Second.
Motion is second, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
Thank you. Order 32620 terminates the Bauman Drain Madison unit. And I won't repeat, but there's a certificate of termination that's being filed at the courthouse and the history and information. All of the wells have been plugged and reclamation work has been done. We'll keep the bond in place until the vegetation growth, we're happy with it. So this order would terminate the Bauman drain.
So did royalty owners petition the dissolution as to?
They did
Or-
not. The working interest owners had that authority
Okay.
and voted to do it. So no comment from royalty owners on this one.
So moved.
Second.
And no comment because there's been no royalties.
Right. I gotta look and see when this thing last produced. No production since September of 2023. Nope, I'm sorry, that's not right. No production since February of 2019. Thank you.
Call for the vote?
Commissioner?
Yes.
Chair Dunlap?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes.
Thank you. So that terminates that. Order 32877. I want to talk about this one a little bit because, Governor, we often talk about innovation versus regulation. We have a regulation in place that requires a minimum 125 feet between fired vessels and tanks and wellheads. That's because in the past, companies have always used what's called atmospheric tanks to process the oil, gas, and water. Marathon has innovated and come up with a new low emitting automated facility design that they're implementing in North Dakota. And they're asking that we approve the fired vessel being closer than the 125 feet so they can shrink the footprint along with putting this innovative technology in place. Just very quickly, this is what a typical leaf facility looks like. What's different about it is those things that look like tanks in the center there are not. They're pressurized processing vessels. Everything's automated, so gas capture comes off those vessels through vapor recovery units that ramp up and down, but they're not open to the atmosphere, so there's never any venting. There's never any oxygen enters the system. Everything is plug and play, so they can move vessels in and out by unhooking the flanges and adding and subtracting vessels as they drill and need more or less capacity. They provided information from ASME and from API that shows that it's proper to allow that heater treater to be closer to those processing vessels than you would allow it for an atmospheric tank. And so we want to grant their request of 50 feet. Along those lines, the new rules that you're putting out will allow operators to submit a sundry and get this approval, within a week from us instead of having to go through a hearing. So red tape reduction, we're submitting it for the red tape reduction process, but very innovative. This eliminates routine flaring. Only in the case of an extreme emergency would there be any flaring at a facility like this. And Marathon is wanting to move forward with these and shrink their footprint. So we want to reduce the regulation and incentivize the innovation.
So moved.
Second.
And LEAF is your acronym for low emission automated facility.
Yes.
And the 125 foot setback that we had was to try to keep sparks and flames away from
Tinted gas.
flammable material.
Mhm.
But in this case, there is, as you described with the new approach here, there is going to be no venting going on. So there should be no explosive fumes or emissions or releases that a spark could ignite because they're all being captured in this enclosed system.
Correct. Yep, 100% capture.
And have they tested this in other places or done this, or what's the?
They've actually constructed 10 of these in North Dakota with the 125 foot requirement. But they've realized that they can simplify and reduce the footprint and save time and money by reducing that distance. And they've come out with a design that they're calling Baby Leaf, that they're going to rebuild all their old atmospheric tank facilities using this technology on the baby leafs. And they'll be asking for reduced distance requirements, which are entirely appropriate.
Good for landowners if we can have smaller footprint, for sure. Is there, on the, in our order, this allows them to go to 50, but we'll have clarity that if people aren't doing this, if they're doing it the old fashioned way, they still are required to do the 125.
Great question, Governor. And yes, so this allows Marathon to submit sundries for approval on their leaf facilities. But any other operator at this point is going to be required to come to a hearing and show us that they're doing the right thing and that they're following ASME and API. The new rule will allow operators to apply through a sundry process to do it. So it'll be much quicker and less expensive for them to do it, but it's still going to require approval. So we're not going to have people moving heater treaters close to atmospheric tanks.
Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Attorney General?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes. Motion carries.
I apologize for having to bring this one, but what we've got for you is a corrected order, order 31584. This is for the east, DCC East Storage Facility, which you approved. And the reason is that we incorrectly identified the confining zone in the previous order. So this would change it from Opeechee, which you can see there, which is kind of a generic term, to the Piper Picard. And that's really important because it contains an anhydrite and some shale intervals, a lot like that siltcrete that are completely impermeable. So we just want to make sure it's absolutely clear to everybody what the confining zone is. So this would just correct order 31584 to change Amsden to Piper Picard and put the right depth in there.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, call for the vote.
Commissioner?
Mm-hmm.
Attorney General?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes, motion carries.
Attorney General, this is probably why you wondered why people would do geology, right? It's this kind of thing.
I don't wonder anymore.
You don't wonder. Awesome.
I used to.
Okay, order 32875. This is an application of Phoenix Operating for a 3840 spacing unit in Williams and Divide County. The reason it's before you is it was opposed by Petro Hunt. Petro Hunt did some analysis and determined that 4 wells per spacing unit is the right number of wells, and so they opposed this. The truth is that when, in the hearing process, what came out is, actually, that's what they're doing, 4 wells in their spacing unit. But the controversy is over that blue well down the center of the 3840. Petro Hunt operates those north-south wells to the north, and Phoenix wants to drill the east-west wells to the south. The real issue here is that is a federal lease in purple up there. It's under litigation and cannot be penetrated by a wellbore. So in order to recover the reserves from that big white space to the east, which is private mineral owners, we need to let Phoenix drill this well. And we're actually directing them in the order to drill the well 200 to 250 feet south of that section line, so that we get the oil even in the absence of a federal permit. So here's a case where it was leased, they paid for the lease, it's being litigated by Friends of the Earth, and they're unable to get a drilling permit. But we can work around that with this 3840 well.
So you're telling me that they leased it in an auction from the federal government, who said you now have the right to drill and recover minerals on our behalf. And now they can't get a permit to actually do that
Right.
from the federal
For
government.
that little piece, that little purple piece there, 80 acres, which mucks up the entire
Yeah.
1920 and 3840.
Oh,
And we should add to Doug's comments that that would also then be sending revenue to a federal government that is
Absolutely.
surely could use some revenue.
Well, that's just fascinating. That'd be like me selling you a car and then taking the tires off.
Sounds like you.
I'd love your support.
So the order you have before you would grant Phoenix's request to drill that well, but not quite the way they've depicted it here in this cartoon. It'll actually moved to the south so that it will recover the hydrocarbons from that empty space that the federal government is blocking.
Sure. Yes. So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
Thank you. And the last order, actually, it's not an order. I guess it is. I have an order number here. It's a default order. So this is a case where we have a complaint against WW Oilfield Services for not plugging and reclaiming and posting a single well bond for the well that you see depicted up there. We properly served them with the complaint, and it imposes a civil penalty of $25,000 plus costs. They did not serve an answer, and therefore we need you to approve a default order.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any questions or comments? Call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes. Motion carried.
I think that's it.
That's all in?
Well, I've got a brief update on federal regulatory matters. You see it listed under item C. So on the BLM Resource Management Plan, we responded to their request for cooperating agency status, and there's an MOU pending. I guess we haven't gotten it from BLM yet to look at. So we haven't signed an MOU. We're waiting for them to send it. Not sure what to make of that. On the conservation and landscape rule, comments and opposition were submitted on July 5th. On the PHMSA pipeline safety rules, comments and opposition letters submitted August 16th. And on the Endangered Species Act rule, we signed on with Alabama's opposition letter August 21st. Item D, I guess, any questions? I should comment that as long as we're talking about that, we're making progress with the Dakota Prairie Grasslands. They have finished their evaluation on 9 wells. We sent them a list of 12. They said yes to 3, no to 6, and 3 more are in review.
What's the rationale for the no on the 6?
The no has to do with whether there's power in there, whether the road's going to be reclaimed, whether there's potential erosion problems. We haven't had a chance to sit down with them and have a conversation on the no's. So we proceeded with a plugging procedure that would still allow us, if we can get a yes, to make the conversion. So we will go back, once they've finished their evaluation of all 12, we'll go back and meet with Brian and Beth and see if we can turn some of those no's into yeses.
And to be clear, we're trying to provide water on national grasslands.
Yes.
And so what is the opposition's based on what? I mean,
In most cases, it's because the power has been taken out, because these wells have been sitting abandoned for a great deal of time. What we want is the opportunity to talk to them about the fact that there are actually solar water pumps that can be put in these wells to
yes.
provide livestock water. I know that from personal experience, so you don't need 3-phase power in there. And in some cases, it's concerns about how the grazing associations might be able to access them if we take the road out. So I think we can have a good conversation about the wells, and we'll just have to continue that conversation. I appreciate your help with the Forest Service and would appreciate that you continue to ask them about why they're saying no to half of these.
I'm having a meeting in the future with the associations and Forest Service, so we may have some more clarity for you down the road.
Lynn, are
We're
you,
happy to get 3 yeses, but we're not happy with 6 nos.
are you coordinating these meetings with the Water Commission as well?
We have not been, and that's a good piece of advice, Governor.
You get to bring their staff in as well, and maybe, have sort of a whole of government pushback on the feds on this stuff. And Doug, when you're having that meeting, you can invite the Water Commission. That would be great.
Yeah. I know I think you're invited your staff or designate, but I'll make sure we get note of that.
Yeah.
So that we have the Water Commission there.
And we just made sure that we left the well bores in a condition that they could easily be re-entered if we can turn the nose into yeses.
Yes.
So,
Good.
and it wasn't easy to get the BLM over that hump, but we got them there. So,
Well, and to tell you the truth, I'd rather be working with Forest Service than BLM.
Anything else on your list?
a couple things. So we're supposed to give a legal update. Mr. Axe is here.
Did you cover the,
Oh, did I miss?
top of the last page there on
Venting and Flynn, and then
I might have missed, a couple of those. Let me, yep. Thank you. They carry over the page. So there are 3 of them there. That one is just anticipated that we're going to see that here in October or November. Presidential executive order, I just keep that on your radar because that executive order tells every federal agency to look under every rock for the opportunity to overturn Trump era regulatory changes and to block fossil fuel production. So more to come on that.
The force-based litigation, we continue to march towards the December 12th deadline for the summary judgment motions. Last week, we served the other side with a expert report from Dr. Haryu at UND. And as the commission was discussing earlier, we're optimistic the report will help to provide the court with technical details that it needs to understand pore space is a communal resource in the same sense that it has shared ownership like oil and gas. And also that implementing it is going to be integral for the long-term viability of our energy sector and the reliability of our power grid. Other than that,
And then have they identified someone who's been harmed by fuels? I mean, do they have
so we are in the middle of discovery. We have served them with requests to identify which landowners that are part of their organization they claim are injured. We are disputing the amount of information they have to provide us, and we are currently seeing whether we can resolve those disputes without court intervention.
Is that a long way of saying they have not identified anyone who's been injured?
They have identified a couple individuals, but have not provided much supporting information so we can establish the veracity of whether those individuals have in fact been injured.
Nothing's been taken from anybody and checks are starting to flow out. So I'm having a hard time just on the fundamental premise of the case that there's injury here.
Well, the other side's, the plaintiff organization's argument will be that their members are injured because they cannot stop the state from forcing their pore space to be amalgamated without their consent. And then it is a constitutional taking that would require certain constitutionally required safeguards. So that is going to be the crux of the legal dispute when the court gets to it.
Under that premise, though, there seems to be an inherent flaw. What if you wanted to build a road and one person didn't want to sign up?
Then the argument would be the state is required to go through eminent domain proceedings in the road context. So the argument will be whether pore space should be viewed like a resource, like oil and gas, or whether it should be viewed as something like a road that requires eminent domain.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for all the commissioners, but clearly, when we look at what's happening and the fact that we're enhancing the economics of agriculture, energy, oil and gas, and attracting manufacturing, it certainly would look, walk and talk like a gigantic resource, as opposed to something else. And so, I mean, it's a resource and all economic and actual common sense would say this is a gigantic resource. And then in the end of the day, what the pooling has done for this, without pooling, we wouldn't have the oil and gas industry that has created the economics, which has created our $6 billion school trust fund, has paid for our roads, has paid for, billions of dollars of water infrastructure. I mean, there isn't a citizen in our state that has not benefited mightily from the resource called our mineral. And in the same way, we're going to have everybody benefiting across the whole state from the resource called another geologic jackpot that we had. I mean, the Bakken was a geologic jackpot and our storage is a geologic. So they're both resources.
Yeah.
And then pooling protects the majority. Because if we were trying to pool all these 1280s that we've been pooling for decades and decades, if you had in the case like of the federal government trying to be a holdout, if you had somebody holding out a few acres in every 1280, the rights of the majority would be impaired for them to pursue their economic activity. And in the same case here with these large storage areas, when you've got, in some cases, this body has approved storage areas. We've had 92% of the folks have voted yes. And so if we didn't have pooling, we wouldn't be able to protect the rights of the 92. And then in the end of the day, with pooling, as it is with oil and gas, and as we heard in what we covered today, then those that are, quote, in the opposition have an opportunity to participate at the highest price that anybody was able to negotiate. Right? I mean, there isn't a lawyer in the world that can come to you and say, I'll get you a better price when it says in plain writing. No, you don't need a lawyer to protect you because you're going to get the highest price that anybody gets paid in the whole pooling area. So skip the lawyer and just take the highest check. I mean, so anyway, you can't understate the importance of this case because if this case had been brought and lost in the 1950s or the 1980s, North Dakota would look completely different right now because we wouldn't have an oil and gas industry.
Yes,
Well, I know the commission understands that if, as the Attorney General's office, we had the capacity to grant summary judgment in our favor. I mean, you understand that we would do that, articulating what the arguments will be. We feel we're in a strong position. And you stated well, and, we feel we're in a strong position, but at the end of the day, they're a motivated group of litigants, and, we're going to be throwing everything at it that we need.
Yep, and one other point that we're optimistic the report will help the court understand is that North Dakota is in the forefront of figuring out how we manage and regulate pore space. So what our courts may do on this question could have reverberations for other jurisdictions who are looking at it.
Appreciate your work to identify the expert testimony also. It's obviously going to be critical, but also I know you're familiar obviously with how you've crafted that with the expert. When I say crafted, ensuring that there not be anybody pushing back to in any way, shape or form alter what is the expert opinion on that and its basis. And I think that creates the absolute best foundation going forward. That's not just, we're not just, litigating the matter and coloring it to the best possible way. We're relying on expertise. And I think that's been clear from the discussions we've had going along and makes for a much firmer foundation, as I said. Thanks.
And no further updates on that case.
Okay.
The commission has questions.
Other than we're grateful for the work you're doing, because this is so important to the foundation of state's future.
And we're roughly a year out from the trial, 11 months.
If a trial happens, I strongly suspect the case will be decided on summary judgment.
Okay.
And then it'll be appealed to the state Supreme Court.
Second one, Northern Oil and Gas, that trial's slated for Stanley in May 7th through 9th. Third one, Blue Appaloosa. Mr. Sagsveen got a notice of entry of judgment that was granted September 12th. So we have a judgment against Blue Appaloosa for $183,000. Fourth one, Liberty Resources. The briefing is complete. No hearing, so just waiting on a decision from the district court in McKenzie County. And then the final one, Industrial Commission versus Department of Interior. Mr. Seavey filed a response to their status report on September 14th. Might add a pretty scathing response. It's appropriate when you look at things like the Phoenix case and the 6 parcels that they managed to lease in September. So we're going to continue to push. We will be back in Judge Trainer's court this month to talk about how they're progressing and are they actually going to get busy and lease some federal lands in North Dakota that matter.
What date are you back in front of Judge Trainer?
I don't remember. I think it's the 24th, but I'll have to get back to you on that. I believe it's October 24th. And then our final item, federal rulemaking. Just very quickly, the proposed leasing rule. Our request for an extension of comment period was denied. Comments were filed on September 22nd. So we got our comments in, very solid legal basis for a potential litigation if it has to come to that. You have 2 more gentlemen going to talk about the DAPL EIS and the NEPA rules.
Brian, John, welcome.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Governor. With regards to the DAPL DEIS, as you know, on September 8th, the Army Corps of Engineers released their draft environmental impact statement. We had been a cooperating agency before and submitted comments, but this was the public release that went out to everyone. We are currently in the midst of doing a statewide comment period on that with many different agencies, investment groups all throughout the state government to provide comments and to update the comments that we currently submitted. The due date on those is November 13th. There will be 2 public meetings the Army Corps of Engineers will hold in North Dakota on November 1st and November 2nd in downtown Bismarck. Some things to highlight that came out in the DEIS. Probably the first that we have not seen before is MHA Nation estimated revenue loss per year at a tune of about $160 million. 80% of their budget is derived from oil production, and a quarter of that lost revenue is specifically with their annual health insurance costs. Denying the easement would result in about 3,000 to 5,000 wells that could possibly shut in, stranding 300 to 500,000 barrels of production per day, which would lead to about 3.5 crude oil train cars going through Morton County that would have to move that oil around. And we're probably looking at a 9-month to 1 year delay in getting those train cars moving.
Those would be trains as in 100 or 110 unit car trains per day.
One thing the Army Corps of Engineers highlighted was the social cost of carbon. Huge section of their EIS is about the social cost of carbon. They estimate that in 2020, the social cost of downstream greenhouse gas emissions from the oil that is moved through is about $1.6 to $9.1 billion, depending on the discount range. And in 2040, 2050, they can only go about 30 years, is 3.8 to $14 billion a year on the social cost of carbon.
Can I just interject that I think that's the most ridiculous calculation that the federal government has ever come up with because, and I'll tell you why. I mean, it's not even ideological about whether you think there's a social cost of carbon, but if you pursue the rules of the federal government and you destroy production in the United States, which is clearly the intent of this administration, you do not destroy demand. Demand does not go away. You destroy supply from the US, demand does not go away. Then what happens? It's a global market. Demand is filled by someone else. And the other people that are filling it don't produce, they're not doing 96% gas capture. They're not building clean pipelines. They're not doing any of that stuff. And so what this cost is some theoretical, professor sitting in a room coming up with a thing. It does not understand the reality that when you shut it down here, it gets produced someplace else. And so there's no savings. There's no savings on this so-called social cost of carbon. The only way you're going to do that is through innovation. You're not going to do it through the regulation that says we're going to stop it here. And to add to this thing, I mean, let's just be clear. This is the only pipeline in America when there's probably now close to 40,000 crossings of oil and gas pipelines and water bodies. This is the only one and has been operating safely for over 5 years. Horizontally direct drilled, 93 feet below the base of the river, one of the safest of those 40,000 crossings. It's the only one that's had an EIS opened up again after it's been operating safely. And this is a couple 1,000-mile long pipeline, and there's 1 mile, less than 1 mile, that has an intersection with federal ground, and that's where it crosses at this crossing. And so this is a political targeted at the oil and gas industry. This is not about the environment. It can't be about the environment because again, even if they say, hey, we're going to shut it down, even here, the demand won't go away. And as you just noted, John, we're going to start moving it by train, which is cost more, less efficient, less environmentally safe than it is through the pipeline. So the whole thing, and then the whole timing of this is just time to be, again, match up like it did the first time, with the presidential election. And so it's like, I'm great to hear they've got their theoretical calculation, but it does not. And you were there, you were on the call. I specifically asked, are you taking into account the systematic emissions from around the globe when this production is replaced with someone else? And the answer was, no, we're not doing that. I mean, they said it a little more academically, but the answer was no, they're not counting. They're not counting it in. I think you all heard it. Anybody that was on that call heard they're not doing that. So anyway, we will. And this is also setting new ground because this is the first time they've released a draft EIS without a preferred alternative.
Yeah.
At least it's more dangerous. We get through all these communities.
Well,
I mean,
I'm not
it is
laughing, but
remarkable.
it's-
No, it is remarkable though. The articulations that come up, whether we're at land board, we're sitting here having these discussions, and it's just not. It's take to get that into the national discussion at a persistent level. Like, you got to talk about these things for months for people are busy. They've got their lives. It's remarkable. And it's so evident on its face, and it is troubling. There are times you can't help but look around and you do wonder, it's a big grand statement, but you watch our politics and you just wonder, why do we even have politics? Why do we? Are we solving problems?
Mhm.
I mean, I'm proud of my service here. I feel like that's what we do. I feel like we have tremendous staff, expertise. People come in, it's a head shaker, though, I'll tell you. And it's not an academic complaint to say, well, do we have politics? I don't know. National level, it's troubling. Governor, we appreciate your being on the national discussion along that, but it's damn tough to look at that at the media and everything else and wonder why aren't they insisting on that discussion more? I think they'd be curious to say, well, okay, what do the rest of you think about this? I'm not getting into your politics. I'm really not, because I'm looking at it from the standpoint of a national discussion on matters of not only state, regional, national, but international consideration and importance, and talking about curtains, and that's not, something just to throw up our hands. Anyway, I'm not going to solve it. I don't pretend to, but it does start in places like this. I hope all the states have opportunities to have these discussions, and there's got to be some way to have an appetite for public discussion that is persistent to where the public starts saying, I'm going to insist on that. I'm going to insist on that from people.
we have a pretty big plate with a lot of resources and a lot of things that we provide this state, this country, and the globe. So whether you're talking about food security, economic security, I mean, North Dakota plays a very big role in that. I think so often visiting with some of my colleagues, they aren't necessarily sure how they connect to this. But when you do start to talk about food security being compromised, energy security, which goes back to economic security. And on top of that, the more that you do to hinder, harm, and stop any of this development or movement, you put those that are less fortunate at a big disadvantage in this country. Those are economically and socially disadvantaged. How come no one's saying anything about them?
Oh, that's remarkable.
And this is supposed to be those that actually care the most, I've been told about them. So
I can't be the only one who's tired though of them. National commentators, I look at this, they're always like, oh, Governor Burgum over in North Dakota, he's a smart, nice guy. And it's like, okay, well, if he's smart, we think he is, and you're talking about these things, why don't you insist on asking these questions of other people who are looking to be leaders of the country? Now, somebody will criticize me and say, Drew's talking politics. I'm not. I'm talking about matters of significant state, regional, national, international concern. It's super frustrating. I'm watching stuff since I was like 4th grade. It's always been interesting to me. It's less interesting to me today than it has ever been, because you're watching and they won't do it. We have the benefit of knowing you personally, Doug, and talking to you about these things, and all these national commentators are saying, oh gosh, he's really smart. Why don't you ask some questions along the lines of the discussion you just had with him outside? I don't mean to put you in a weird spot with this discussion, but I'll tell you, our work here is really important. And Lynn, you and your crew and everybody else and people sitting at the table should never feel shy about what you just said. We play a very significant role, and people could play off of this and say, we're going to insist on that in our state too. We're going to do those same kinds of things, and we're going to demand that of our national government. I'm only 57, so I'm still naive enough to think you can actually make a difference, but you have to be insistent, and you have to not worry that someone is going to say, oh, he's kind of a loudmouth, or she's kind of a pain in the ass, or whatever it might be. You have to push that. You have to push that. And so I'll leave it at that. I come to these meetings and I'm really, I don't know, the work, the professionalism, all the tenacity of people and the development. I look at this and I've inherited this. I've been here now 1 year and 3 quarters, but I've inherited a tradition of what's gone on. And I'm proud to do it. And I hope I can always do my part to make sure that we hand it off to the next ones. But boy, I sure hope more people outside of our region and in the country are paying attention.
And to augment and follow on something you had said about we start to put oil on rail. Rail is safe. We have a lot of things that are good and structurally sound about the rail system. Unfortunately, there is going to be a higher impact, a carbon impact, as some would say. Plus, it leaves it as a target for others. And any more in this day and age, I find it surprising when people with intent are out to harm others.
Yeah.
And be disruptive.
And you can't run wheat or corn through a pipeline. So then when you start running rail cars, then you drive up the price
It
for
can offset,
transportation
yeah.
and ag, and it's just, there's system economics that go down. But going back to John, you mentioned the testimony from MHA, which we appreciate as an integral partner in our oil and gas industry. They're $160 million loss, but I think aren't they, Lynn, about 18% of our production, roughly? So
20%.
So take that times 5, take that number times 5, and all of a sudden you've got another, $800 million of loss for the rest of North Dakota, if that's the MHA loss. And yeah, MHA is using that money to pay, healthcare for all their members, but that 800 million is going to royalty owners and taxpayers and communities and counties and whatever, and they're paying for essential services and healthcare and education too. And so the impact, and then multiply that times, the thing, and it's just, and it makes none of this makes any sense. We said earlier, because the federal government is actually losing money every year. They don't have a balanced budget, and they're shutting down one of the revenue sources, which would be the development of the 240 million acres of land and minerals, whether it's rare earth minerals that are being shut in and put under national monuments, or whether it's oil and gas development. I mean, if you want to get the balance, if you want to have the balanced budget, I mean, you balance the federal budget the same way we do at the state of North Dakota with responsible development. And so it is, so anyway, it's so backwards at financially, environmentally, national security wise. I mean, all of these, for every reason, this is 180 degrees in the wrong direction. But I did interrupt you, John. So if there's other things you want to say about where we're going on this thing, but I mean, what we're seeing here is not. This is. I mean, it's called an EIS. It is not about protecting the environment, because there's zero harm that can happen to the water in the Missouri River. Now they've tried to extend it to say it's about the entire industry. It's not about a crossing. Okay, so what are the carbon emissions of the interstate system? I mean, like man, maybe we should stop, moving goods, by truck. I mean, it's like you could come up with this fake analysis of the carbon impact on entire industries. What's the steel industry? What's the shipping industry? I mean, concrete, how about buildings? Let's stop building buildings. They represent, like, fixed buildings and represent like 30-40% of emissions. Anybody doing the cost of carbon on all the construction going on in our country? No. I mean, they're targeting an industry with this one thing. And so we have to understand this, all these hearings is political theater. But I appreciate every ounce of work that people put into providing strong comments. But we're in a battle here that doesn't make any sense, because this is empowering foreign dictators. It's destabilizing the world. It's eroding American power. It's making our nation less secure. And when we're energy poor, we're not going to solve any of the problems we have financially with budget deficits or taxes or any of that stuff. I mean, so right here, this is kind of ground zero of what's happening in our country. So anything else, John, you want to add?
No, just that, this is a truly statewide effort, and, we just had a meeting yesterday about this. We had over 23 people on the call, all within state government. So with the leadership of, Matt's and your office and Dutch and everyone else, it's truly a team effort. So high priority.
Ryan, anything to offer at all too, or I know you and John have been working closely on this.
Yeah, nothing to offer on DAPL. The thing that I would just offer by means of a segue is that, DAPL is a tree. I mean, it's a giant tree in the forest. The next item on your agenda is the forest. That's the NEPA process. The Biden administration issued a rule seeking to essentially change the NEPA procedure to a substantive rule to affect their desired outcomes, which we have all spoke on. And similarly, a whole government response there with the state of North Dakota. Governor was one of 17 governors that signed on to a letter with largely Western states. The Attorney General signed on. Many thanks to you, Drew, Phil, Matt, for your leadership on rounding up with the Iowa AG's office as well. There were 22 states that joined in an effort, joint comments there. Even our own Department of Transportation joined in with South Dakota, Wyoming, and Idaho. And so there were five states there that joined in DOT comments. And then the state of North Dakota itself also filed its own comments specific to how the NEPA proceeding would affect us. Obviously, DAPL being a huge component of that. There too, we had the Department of Agriculture support through FERLIC. We had everybody at the table was involved in some capacity on that, pushing back. But the biggest concerns there are, again, taking a regulatory process, a procedural rule, and turning it into a substantive rule, redefining terms, introducing new terms, which is open it up to more litigation, create less predictability, less consistency, and just essentially allow the federal government to pick and choose which projects go forward based off of their preferred projects.
Yeah, depending on the administration, with no accountability to the elected people. And so much of the litigation that we have going on right now is a direct result of the federal government and the current administration violating federal law. They're violating federal law, and we've got a great Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court term coming up for the regulatory state is going to be tested in a lot of important ways. These are important matters. North Dakota versus the EPA, West Virginia versus the EPA was a great was a great brick in that wall, and hopefully there'll be others coming. It can't be a coincidence that they're accepting and granting cert to all of these cases for the regulatory regimen in this country. But to that point exactly, and people might say, well, but what's, half the country would say, well, why is that bad? I like the way that's going. Because it's not an accountable person. It's not your elected officials. You don't get to impact your country. You don't get to drive policy when it's that way. It's just, how did the Electoral College turn out? Oh, well, that's going to switch next month. That's not a country.
It removes.
People
due
don't invest
process.
money in that regimen. They don't do it. They don't look to long-term investment when they think, well, how are the polls looking in the presidential race? That's not a country.
We've eliminated due process.
Right,
And
exactly.
procedures and.
No, it's political
science
process.
impact. Yeah,
It's a political process.
that's what we're dealing with.
Yep.
And that's- Yeah.
So watch these US Supreme Court cases, and we get signed on opportunities, and Phil has been beating the bushes for opportunities for things for us to join with other states. And like I say, it's not always immediately proximate, but what we talk about is no politics. We don't do any politics with that stuff. It's all about policy that is directly impactful in North Dakota's interests, regional and national. And we've got a good spate of them, and we're pushing that. And I think in the years ahead, we should look for every opportunity we can to have a lot of people sitting around this table. Not me, because I've had too much caffeine, but to get to tables out in Washington DC when they have hearings, not everybody pays attention to those things, but sometimes they do. And I bet we can find avenues to get our people, to get our experts, to get our elected officials and others sitting at those tables and demanding things. And who knows, at some point it impacts people. I believe it. Otherwise I wouldn't get up in the morning and come in here. It's not that much fun.
Agree. Okay, well, thanks, Ryan, John, Matt. Any closing comments?
No, I was gonna, I think Ryan said it well. It's just another rule in a long line of rules or proposed rules that are continuing to elevate environmental and practical concerns and our authority as a state.
I think what's new, Governor, is we actually have an all of state government approach to these things now. It used to be pretty siloed, and I felt like the lone wolf out there hollering about federal regulations, but it really is a team process now. It's great.
Good.
I was there with you.
Well, appreciate the coordination that's going on. So Ryan, John, and AG's office, thanks for pulling all the other agencies because this affects everybody. Okay, we're concluding that section. We're moving on to State Energy Research Center. There's been a request for a short break, so we're going to take a few minute break and we'll reconvene here in 3-4 minutes.
Washington DC.
We'll call the meeting back to order, and Ryan Kalk and Reese Haas, State Energy Research Center are up next.
Thank you, Governor, members of the commission.
Ryan, you can join us at the table if you'd like.
This legislative session, we've had two legislative directed projects that ran through CERC instead of our typical research and development program process. So these are the next two items you have before you today. The first one is related to rare earth elements. It would be a study of rare earth elements in the state, kind of furthering on some of the work that Ed Murphy mentioned earlier this morning on his report to you. The study would include drilling program through the Geological Survey. They would take 500,000 of this amount to do actual drilling to help delineate some of the extent of those rare earth elements in North Dakota. It would also include a portion for looking at oil and gas reservoirs, produced water, oil and gas drill cuttings. So if approved today, this would authorize us to enter into that contract through EERC and CERC to conduct the $1.5 million rare earth study.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion, and a second. Ryan, welcome. Thanks for driving all the way down. And I would say always good to see somebody from NDSU, even though now you're working. But any thoughts on this that we need to share that Reese hasn't summarized?
I just would appreciate the commission's support on it and to explain a little more detail that we're working closely with the Geological Survey because there's areas they do sampling that we haven't done up at the ERC. And we're going to focus on the produced water and some other things, really trying to paint that picture, what's available in North Dakota for rare earth elements as we look at the supply chain. So that's kind of, this is a huge piece to tie into the rest of the program.
Great.
I'm glad to see you guys are doing this because we are aware that there's been some testing in some places and it looked really encouraging. So It'd be good to have this follow through.
Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor.
Yes, motion carries. Next is 4B.
Yep, thank you, Governor. The next study you got before you is continuation of the salt cavern study. This legislative session in our budget bill, the legislature allocated $11.2 million for the final phase of the salt cavern demonstration project. This is to actually drill and construct the salt cavern in North Dakota, demonstrate that it can be done. If you recall, in previous biennia, we've had desktop surveys of potential salt cavern in North Dakota. We had a drilling project last biennium that actually took core and did some analysis that looked pretty promising. So this is the next phase to actually construct and operate a salt cavern in North Dakota. The legislature gave us $6 million for ZIP and then the decommitted amount from the Bakken Energy Project. So your approval today would authorize us to enter into that contract with EERC to complete this project.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Maybe Reese or Brian, you want to talk a little bit about what this project could mean to the oil and gas industry?
Yes, Governor, the big thing I want to put out right away is that's a lot of money, $11 million. We need to find a partner who brings the rest of that money. We're talking anywhere from, one might have to correct me, but to develop a salt cavern could be 40, 100, or 40 to $80 million more. It's really an unknown cost, but it's a lot to develop. So the way we're looking at this is, we're looking at some partners right now. That's why today kind of was probably come back with a detailed proposal. But the oil and gas producers, they need a place to store natural gas during peaks and valleys. This will allow them to do that. As we look at the potential winning of a hydrogen hub, this can become instrumental to North Dakota being the hydrogen hub for our area, because once again, we can store it. So this would be a game changer for North Dakota, having the ability to store underground for those times when demand, but all of a sudden demand hits and we're ready to go.
Lynn, anything you want to also add in terms of the overall economic benefit?
Yes, so Governor, as you're aware, we've been working through the Department of Commerce to attract investment into petchem operations, gas to liquids, potential hydrogen hub. There's even some work going on to see if Western North Dakota could be a regional propane hub for distribution. Today, all of our propane goes to Kansas, mixed as a natural gas liquid. It gets fractionated down there, travels through a pipeline to Sioux City, Iowa, and then comes back here by truck, which really makes no sense for the people that have to use propane for grain drying and that sort of thing. So this is far reaching in terms of all of the next phase of industry that we're trying to attract to the state. And this technology is critical to all of them. So the things that they need to store and process, this is the safest and really the only way to store them in bulk.
Has there been any assessment made of the pipeline network that'll be necessitated for that, required for that?
So yes, Attorney General, we've looked at the existing infrastructure, and that's part of the work that EERC is doing right now, is to look at all the things that you need, water, rail, 4-lane highway, pipelines, and salt. And where do those things overlay in the state of North Dakota? I'm happy to report that there's 3 or 4 locations where that happens. And so depending on the industry that decides to become the partner, likely will determine where this test is made, but the work will apply to the other 3 or 4 locations.
We'll watch for the protest signs.
Well, if I could add, that's part of the company's assessment as we're talking through them. They're looking at the economics because it's a lot for them to put into it too. And all the things that the question was, if they have those co-located in the same area, I think we can find a winner there.
Then the 4 diagrams that are shown on the chart here, Reese, to the right.
Yes.
Those indicate 4 different locations.
No, those are 4 different states and provinces where salt caverns have been constructed. The ones that we felt
It was an eye test. That's Arizona, Alberta.
So those are actual
It's not,
salt
it's not
caverns.
a medium, North Dakota.
Those are actual salt caverns that have been constructed in salt beds like we have in North Dakota in other locations. So based on the early testing from Halite 1, we think our salts are suitable. And what we've seen in other states, it looks like it can be done. It needs to be demonstrated. And then that will help take one of the risks away from these industries that are looking at North Dakota. We've got the resource, we have the salt and the material to turn into petchem, but there's a few other risks that we can eliminate for them.
And what would be the size, the amount of storage capacity in one of these things?
So one of the most recent ones, Governor, that has been constructed is in Kansas, where they drilled a single vertical well bore and they put 6 horizontal salt caverns in a hexagonal shape around them. And it's capable of storing 8 BCF of natural gas and in the neighborhood of 7 million barrels of propane. And you can move it in really fast and out really fast. So deliverability is one of the safety and deliverability are the 2 big things that salt caverns deliver, and huge storage capacity.
So even though, as Brian mentioned earlier, there's a cost, an industry cost, but the cost per amount of storage is quite low in the end because of the enormous size of the capacity.
Right, and these things have a 25 to 50-year life.
Then what happens? You're saying life to get built.
No, I'm saying that
To use it?
these salts do actually do something called creeping. And so in the process of using them, the storage facility, becomes damaged, I guess, by putting brine in and out and materials in and out. And so, but we've got thousands of square miles of salt beds. So,
So then what happens at the end of that? You're 53. What takes place?
at the end of that, typically you fill what's left of the salt cavern with salt saturated brine, and you plug the wellbore access to it, and the salt over time creeps in like toothpaste and the cavern disappears.
Okay. Got it.
You talked about some of the applications, which I think are great, but it also creates opportunities because to the point you talked about propane and our ability to look at other compounds in there. The hydrogen industry itself, or ammonia specifically, generally has to use very large, expensive tanks, and you could not have something this big. I mean, you would need something this big if you're going to sustain an operation here in North Dakota, because there are a couple of potential operations that may make an announcement in a year or two, and this would be ideally suited for them. It would now give us nitrogen as the main source of fertilizer for North Dakota and the upper Midwest. It'd be a good thing. And as a carrier of hydrogen, it gives another marketing opportunity into some other areas. So that'd be good.
Great point, because as Lynn noted, we export natural gas to import propane we use. And as you know, we do not produce all the fertilizer that we use in the state. So we export natural gas and then import fertilizer.
Yep.
It'd be great if we could be doing all that here. The 2 geologists, Lynn and Ed is still here. That Dunham salt core up in the upper left looks looks perfect. I mean, just optically, because it looks like you can see right through it like it's glass. Right? And then we've got the darker ones in the bottom, but talk a little bit about another one of our geologic jackpots, which is, just how good is our salt here.
Well, unfortunately, our thickest salt, 500-600 feet thick, the prairie is the deepest, so it's really too deep for this, but that's our potash. That's where our potash zones are within that. But
the Dunham salt is very widespread across the state. And as you can see, it's almost 100% halite. So it's near perfect in terms of constructing horizontal salt caverns. The pine salt taught us some interesting things about the Permian age. So there's a material in there called thanolite, which is a sodium sulfate. The only place we see that in the modern world is places like Devil's Lake, where a lake gets very cold and freezes over, and then it precipitates out. So how did we happen to get a thick salt bed with periodic freezing episodes during the Permian age? That's got the geologists scratching their head as to what was going on. If you want to talk climate change, go from a desert climate where salt is precipitating to a Devil's Lake climate where thanolite is precipitating, and mix those two together. So the Permian had climate change in spades, and yet we worry about what's going on today. Just a little comment. So we've learned a lot from the coring of the Dunham and the Pine, and we will learn a lot more when we do Halite 2.
Great. Well, good commentary, important project, another key piece of infrastructure moving forward. We've got a motion, a second. We'll call for the vote.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Attorney General?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Brian, for driving down.
Guys.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah.
Knew that Drew hadn't had enough geology today, so we had to get.
I tell you, I've been converted way before today. I just, would be.
Well, welcome B and D. Lori, Todd, thank you for being here. Take it away.
Industrial Commission, today I'd like to formally inform you that I intend to retire in the second quarter of 2024. I'm extremely grateful for the support you've all given me, both individually and as a bank over my career. And I never intended to become the president of the bank when I started 8 years ago, but it actually has been one of the highlights of my career to be able to work with this group. And I just want to thank you for that opportunity, and I hope that I've left the place a little bit better than when I came. That's the goal, and so I plan to continue for as long as it takes to find my successor, but I thought it would be important to at least start the process. I know the governor, you'd asked about the cash management study. I'll be integrally involved in that during this process, and I just really appreciate that opportunity. We got a really strong management team right now. I need to tell you that. So I feel very, very confident that whoever takes my place, they've got a good group to work with, and the bank will continue to thrive long after I'm done. So again, lastly, not only for all the advice and support, but your friendship. It's been a really fun ride for me, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to get to know all of you personally and consider you all friends. And so I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with my grandchildren and some of those other things. So there's my comments. And I mean it this time.
Well, we're grateful for your leadership and your service, Todd, and for everything you've done, the team that you've built. And I was going to jokingly say, you've always been an attention to detail, but you must not have read that you don't get to decide when you retire.
We proofread it and we made a couple changes. You signed it though. That's good.
But no, we appreciate the long lead time, and it gives us an opportunity this is such an important role in leadership of the bank, and it gives us an opportunity to have a long lead time to make sure we do the appropriate search to fill the big shoes you're leaving, but you stepped in at a critical time. And then, of course, with everything we, had going on between federal funds, state funds, all the ups and downs, economically, it's been quite a ride during your tenure, but we are in a better spot than we've ever been, and appreciate that.
Thank you.
We are, I'm happy and grateful that you stepped up. Eric was a big loss for the bank. I didn't know you were going to be that big of a contribution to it, though. All joking aside, you've done a wonderful job there, and serving in this capacity, you've done a fantastic job. Really appreciate that. You'll be sorely missed, And I do agree with my colleagues. I don't remember seeing anything that told us we could sign off and let you go. So apparently I must have missed that meeting or something, but thank you for what you've done for this state, for the organization, for the Industrial Commission. People sometimes maybe don't realize all the things that go on behind the scenes, but starting the ESG policy and study and work there, I think you were instrumental in making sure that that was framed up properly, along with all the other work. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I just want to add, we've known each other a long time and appreciate that friendship too, but it has been a pleasure working with you the last year and 3/4 that I've had the privilege of serving as Attorney General. And it is always, I should find a better way to describe it. It is like the clown show when you come in here with all the bank people, and clown sounds disparaging. I mean it like it's festive and you yell, you folks are all really engaged, and you're also very transparent with us, open about what you're doing, answer questions. And you'll have a lot of, there'll be a big legacy that you leave and part of it for me, and I'll end with this, but I appreciated our opportunity to have discussions toward the end of the session about a couple matters, including Industrial Commission oversight of the Bank of North Dakota. And I know we've had a couple of discussions here about that. That's an important matter for the years ahead. And I thank you for sparking that discussion with me. I took to heart that discussion and have kept it in mind and will going ahead. I think that you should feel good about that, leaving the opening for that discussion, because it's really important. It's really important for this incredibly important institution, North Dakota. So thanks. Everything else, Jim.
Well, we'll be seeing you at multiple more future meetings.
Yep.
We have to do all our.
No, I plan to work while I'm still engaged for as long as you'll have me.
And we look forward to your contributions on the cash management study as well. It's an important one. So is there other Lori, Karen, other things you want to talk under this topic here today?
So Lori is just going to review the memo that you have as attachment 23 that is a result of the discussion that was held at the July 28th.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you for letting me come here and visit with you today. And I'm here on behalf of the advisory board. The memo that's in front of you includes everything that was talked about at that July 28th meeting. And the proposal and timeline are based on the guidance that you provided during that meeting as well. So going down to the third paragraph where the timeline starts, formal communication to our BND employees will follow this meeting. And we have an all-employee meeting scheduled on Monday the 9th. So there was an email that went out to all of our staff today, just in case there was, well, the press release will go out. We wanted them to know about that in advance. And then on the 9th, Todd will share a little bit about his legacy that he is leaving with the bank and his leadership journey with our employees. So that will be an important and a very fun meeting, I think, for us. And then following that, we are prepared to post internally at BND for this position. We do have a very strong succession plan, so we wanted to allow our internal candidates an opportunity to apply if they're interested. And then with the job of this size and scope, it is also necessary to go broader than that, as you mentioned. So Karen and I have talked a little bit about engaging an executive search firm, and I believe you have a memo that's attached regarding the search team. The advisory board did want me to share, though, that they do feel it's important that the candidate would either be from North Dakota or have strong ties to the state, just because of the relationships that are so important to this role. And then on the second page of the memo is a recap of what we talked about for the search team, that each IC member or a designated representative would be a part of that team. Karen Tyler, members of the advisory board yet to be determined by the Industrial Commission and advisory board chair, and then myself, I'm on that list as well. Memo that covers what we talked about in July.
Yeah, if we don't do this, that means he has to say it.
We've tried it.
Second.
So the action item that we are moving is the construct of the search committee.
Yeah.
Which, given the previous discussion, we have each industrial commission member or their designee 2 members of the Bank of North Dakota Advisory Board, which would be appointed by the Advisory Board Chair, Carl Bollingberg. Lori will be part of that, but our Chief Administrative Officer at the bank, and then myself, and I would be serving in the capacity of the committee chair. So that would be the action.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Yep, that's what I'm seconding. Sounds good.
A motion and second related to the creation of the, effectively the search committee that would be handling both the internal and external process for Todd's replacement on a timeline to be determined. When you said before the next legislative session, you don't mean the special session or?
No, I did say second quarter, so I hope it's done by then.
The special session or the continuation of the current session.
Yeah.
They have 5 days left, so.
Yep.
They don't need me to come back. They just come on back. Okay, any other questions or comments? We'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes. And to get things going, Lori, will you be working with the advisory board on getting the 2 appointees?
yes,
Okay, and then Karen, when would you like the appointees as chair? When would you like the appointees from the commission members designees? In a week or so, or what's the?
yes, Governor, that would, a week to 2 weeks would be helpful to move the process along.
Okay.
And then Lori and I will continue to work together as we bring the search team together and get the process going.
And then I think when we get, each of us will make our appointments. They'll make theirs, and then Karen, if you can let the industrial commission know who's all serving on the committee, because at the end of the day, the hiring decision belongs to the 3 elected members of the industrial commission. I mean, I want to make sure that everybody understands that we're
doing it.
We're the ones that have the responsibility to appoint the leaders of these agencies, and with the support of an organization like this that we create and empower. But at the end of the day, the decision is going to come back to a vote by the industrial commission. Okay, so week 10 days by end of Friday next week, have your, or sooner, have your appointments into to Karen for your designee. Right, okay, next, back to you, Todd.
We just have the presentation, the non-confidential minutes, and then the only other thing I have under other is, and maybe Reese covered it, under the big impact that we would have to the bank under 2015 that got rescinded under that OMB bill is there was, under that bill for water resources, for funding water resources, the water resources bill actually had $100 million of our capital going to fund the water fund, the Hofstede fund. Under the OMB bill, we had that changed to be a line of credit. I will tell you, the line of credit's been signed and it's in place, but that would be the one thing that we would be concerned with is, there's other things that we're administering around there, but that would be the one thing that we want to make sure that, we think the line of credit's the right way to go and not have it come out of our capital. So that was, as we went through it, a direct impact to the bank besides the salaries and everything else that's going on. That was kind of the one big item that we would tell you that we're going to be paying close attention to as the special session.
But the water commission is not drawn on that line of credit.
It's not drawn on, nor is it.
I wouldn't anticipate that they would be, maybe in the second year.
Yes, maybe.
So it's not
Yes.
it's not going to disrupt
No,
operations.
no, not at all. No. So other than that, that was the only other thing I wanted to bring up.
Okay, super. Anything else?
Nope. That's it for us. All right.
Well, again, thank you, Todd, and look forward to, you had a strong start. I'm sure you'll have a strong finish.
Yep, I promise to keep working hard.
Running through the tape.
Yep, for sure. All right. Thanks. Yes.
Next up, North Dakota Housing Finance Agency.
Started taking on my work.
Watch you closer.
Dave, Jennifer, Kayla. Good to see all of you.
Good morning.
Just barely.
Yeah. Can you finish by morning?
We have 4 minutes.
You do it, guys.
All right. Okay, we have just a couple of reports to you, and even the first one is on regarding homeless programs that we took over from the Commerce Department starting July 1st. And even though this memo has my name on it, I was not the author. I'm the author. We'll talk about it. It's Jennifer.
Thank you, Dave. So we did take over the homeless programs, the Emergency Solutions Grant, which is a federally funded HUD program, and then the North Dakota Homeless Grant, which is in a general fund appropriation. Effective July 1st, we began working though earlier to develop the allocation plans so that we could be the least disruptive to our homeless providers as possible. These funding sources provide funding for emergency shelter and essential services to the people that are residing temporarily in the shelter. Rapid rehousing and homeless prevention, which can be rental assistance or case management. And so it's a very big, impactful programs when used together. And our homeless providers are very reliant on these funds. So we didn't want to disrupt for too long, knowing that there was going to be about a month of disruption in funding. So we did quickly get a plan out and accepted applications. We did make some significant changes in that previously Commerce had a maximum allowance of 50,000 per provider to apply for. And we determined that $50,000 does not go very far when you're dealing with homelessness, and to have so many different pots of money to go through, we felt that it would make more sense to fund larger and less organizations, because that does reduce our administrative burden as well as the organizations who have to submit reimbursement requests. So for the Emergency Solutions Grant, which is federally funded, we get an allocation of $486,494. We have to, we put in $120,000 of cash match from our North Dakota Homeless Grant appropriation, so allocating $606,000. We received 24 applications for over $2 million, so quite oversubscribed. We selected just 8 organizations, and that list of awards is in your package that is attached to this memo. Additionally, the North Dakota Homeless Grant, because we reduced the number of awardees for the federal dollars, we wanted to be really cognizant of how we were allocating funds so that we weren't taking away from an organization who has previously been funded under one of the programs. So our funding is a little bit different for the North Dakota Homeless Grant, but again, we were allocated $2.5 million, which we divided between the 2 years in the biennium. So we made available $1.25 million. And we received requests for over $2.8 million. So again, double over subscription on that. And the awards are also attached on the list of awards before you here. So with that, I don't have a lot of other information to provide, except for we are getting the first reimbursement requests in and just kind of working through some changes as we are a different administrating agency than Commerce. So there are some quirks to work out to doing business with us. And then finally, the last attachment that I gave you is just a quick reference of what these programs can pay for. So any questions for me? We did our best to provide funding across the state. So you will see Fargo, Bismarck, Grand Forks, Mandan, Minot, Devils Lake were funded. But and everybody who applied did receive some funding if they submitted a complete application. Any questions?
On the emergency solutions, I mean, you get a good look across the whole state of all these organizations, and then you guys do a fabulous job of distributing, you know, what was it, 600,000?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what do we think the total, do you have any sense from working those orgs what the total budgets is? I mean, what do we spend as a state on homelessness right now?
Yeah, so their budgets are far, I mean, the YWCA's budget for their emergency shelter alone is probably close to $1 million.
For one location?
For one location.
And they're generally taking women and families that
Yes.
are
Yeah.
may have been displaced by violence or.
Yeah, I believe Aaron Prochnow has indicated that their ESG award just covers the lights for the year. So we're helping them keep the lights on, and they fundraise to provide everything else involving those services. You know, and obviously the priority is, you know, emergency shelters have their place within our homeless infrastructure, but our main goal is to provide rapid rehousing and homeless prevention. So rapid rehousing is helping somebody get quickly out of their homeless state into permanent housing, whether it be an apartment or some other supportive services. Homeless prevention is they have home, we need to help them keep it by avoiding eviction somehow. So those are where we want to prioritize the money because it goes further when you're helping them maintain a home rather than providing more of those emergency services.
And on the emergency, when you've got people, families, particularly women and children displaced by violence, what's the length of stay at some of these places?
I don't have the answer for you on off the top of my head of length of stay. I mean, it's really dependent on each individual
The
and
idea is to keep it as short as
as
possible.
short as
and then
possible
rehouse,
is, yep.
Find another solution.
Yep, absolutely. You know, YWCA is very unique. We are helping funding in other programs to build the campus on the presentation of Sisters Convent grounds. They're purchasing, they have Lantern Light, which is going to be a 23 unit permanent supportive housing project. We financed Grace Gardens years ago, which is like 30 some units of permanent supportive housing. So we are trying to help them focus on that more permanent supportive housing with some transition in there so that they can have less impact on that shelter. But that campus is really, when you're dealing with that unique set of people who have trauma and violence, that being able to access all the services in close proximity is really an important type of a way to serve that group of people.
Great, thank you.
I believe Governor to answer a couple of your questions there. I think Aaron talking about the Y one time, it's, you know, between 12 and 18 months that somebody's typically staying at like Grace Gardens. And then your question about the total budget of these providers, we'll find that out or try our best to find out. If you're not aware, the Government Services Interim Committee, there was a study proposed, HCR 3030, to look at homelessness and funding for it, the effectiveness of the rent help program that was done. So they held their first meeting today, but they had Mr. Attorney General Wrigley's crime lab took up most of the meeting today, I believe. But I think this study for homelessness will be on the agenda, probably the next meeting in December or the one after that.
It takes a long time to explain to people that there's no longer any of the issues that were there 8 months ago.
Actually, yeah.
Literally, that's literally, I just could have just given testimony right there, but.
What committee, what interim committee is it?
Government Services. Ben Koppelman's the chair and Tim Mather's the vice. So that's something I think we should look at over that committee.
Be good to have a macro look at what the total estimated spend is. And then also the metrics of population moving through, and then how do we get people to not keep recirculating? And then, and it's, you know, when we're looking at it, I mean, you're going to find that the intersection, you know, with homelessness and mental health and addiction is like the co-occurrence is so high that it's practically 100% in many of these cases.
And that's where you get the recycle.
And that's where we've got to figure out, because it's a healthcare problem, and that housing first can help, but we've got to solve the healthcare issue. But okay, you guys know that, but let's get some metrics around it. But did you want to talk about the homeless grants too separately?
I covered all of them together.
Got them covered, so
Yep.
you got all good.
We're all good.
Okay, so that moves on to item 6B.
Yeah, that'd be me.
All right,
Thanks.
Kayla.
So just to start off as a reminder and an intent overall to reduce the red tape and then work for the commission, we had back in December of 2022, an annual authorizing resolution, which you guys approved the agency to issue up to 450 million of bonds for the calendar year of 2023. So this annual authorization allows us to issue the bonds then without time constraints and trying to get in here for approval and getting to the market, which is really kind of nice for us. And, yeah, it is nice to time it right? And so also we just come then afterward to kind of present on how the bond sale went, which is where we're at now. So to date for 2023, we've issued 365 million of the 450 that you guys had approved. And if we look just recently on August 15th, we closed on our 2023 DE series. This was for 200 million in bonds. It included 125 million in tax exempt bonds, which had a yield of 4.26%, which is a great yield right now, right? We also had 75 million in taxable bonds with a bond yield of 5.49. So you can see on the information that we provided, there's a comparative to our previous bonds that we priced at the beginning of 2023. The taxable security was up about 50 basis points, and this is because at the beginning of the year in January, we had a swap, which reduced our yield. So overall, we're really happy with how the pricing went. The spring, well, actually, I should say, summer, fall housing market has been a bit crazy for tax exempt bond financing and just overall housing agencies. So we're getting through the money faster than we probably would have anticipated, which means we will be looking to do another bond here at the end of the year to just try and keep up, specifically on the tax exempt side for first time home buyers. So as you can see, our current rate right now is 5.9. The average 30 today, I believe, was 7.762. So we're quite a bit lower.
That's great. And demand is still strong. People are still.
Yeah, yesterday we did over 2.3 million in first time home buyer loans across the state of North Dakota. So we're still averaging, I would say, in that 7 to 9 million a week. We keep saying, when's it going to slow down? Probably soon, but we've thought it'd be for a while and it just hasn't slowed down yet.
But you've got the most attractively priced loans in the state right now, so people are finding you.
Right.
The tax exempt side, the first home program is said it's well over 1% below the market, if not 1.5. The Roots program, which is more of a market rate program for non-first time home buyers, we're probably right on market today with the pricing, but because of the way the secondary market functions at the federal level with Fannie and Freddie, they put so many loan level price adjustments on things that ours remains, even though the rate's the same or higher, it's still a better deal for the customers because they're not paying as much for costs. Okay, so we get to do a little bond issue.
Yeah, we'll do a
Here
small
to
one.
tide us over, which isn't ideal because it's the same cost basically to have one deal done versus a larger one, so.
So how much do you have left in your authorization?
We have 85, but we'll probably do 75 million. So that we can time the next bond in order to do a taxable and tax exempt at the same time, which helps with pricing. So.
Great. Well, good job. We take advantage of the less red tape.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll be back with a resolution in January probably. We might have to have a little larger request. We'll see how business is going.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. Well done. Anything else we need to know?
A couple things maybe. We were going to have our financial advisor, Kane Mitter. They've been our financial advisor since 2004. They're going to plan to attend your November meeting and provide you with a financial report on the bond trust account and where the agency is at. So that's something we haven't done since before COVID. So I think it's appropriate that you all see that. And then the second thing, I apologize, I was not able to get any of you on the button pushing patrol for the conclusion of the high rise.
That's what we call this meeting.
I apologize for that, but I didn't even know it was going to happen on Saturday till Thursday.
We know some guys that would have been hip checking us out of the way. So.
Yeah.
To my surprise, when I opened up Twitter that morning and there it was.
I apologize again.
Yeah, I don't know how you're gonna cure that. It just feels like it's done.
Let you down.
Drew said that he would have given paid a big charity donation.
Exactly.
Housing funds and a chance to push it. So it was kind of missed revenue opportunity. Yeah, it was going to be.
Okay, that's all we had.
Okay. Well, and to the degree that you guys were connected to that, in addition to the spectacle, it actually worked.
Yeah.
Unlike South Dakota, dropped that mill and elevator down there and it all went off and then it went down and it was still.
Oh, really?
I've not seen that.
And nothing happened to the building next to the high rise.
It really was incredible.
Yeah.
Glass down, pancake.
When you try to blow them up and then they don't come down,
That's
there's a
not-
lot of cost.
Yeah.
Associated in trying to safely get it to come down after that. So I'm glad, I was glad there was we didn't have to move to Plan B.
Yeah.
Done cleanly with Plan A.
Is that like a cruise missile coming in or something, or? I mean, that would have been perilous, yeah. No, I was nice, textbook, it was good.
Okay.
Thank you,
all.
guys.
Thank you. Oh, and Sandy's Donuts thanks you, too, for knocking that building down on a Sunday morning, because they were, usually they don't run on donuts till about noon. They were out by 8:15 in the morning. Just a line around the block there. And they didn't have their inventory planning, 5 days worth of donuts for the.
Judging by where they were filming, I thought people miscalculated a little bit what the dust field was gonna look like. It was like coming toward the camera, and you're like, that isn't stuff. That's definitely gonna go over.
Thanks.
You guys.
Thanks. Welcome, Claire, North Dakota Transmission Authority.
Thank you, Governor and Commissioners. We're here today to ask you for consideration of our grid resiliency grant award process. Lisa's put it up. Have you shared the calendar already?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so our goal is to get the application process rolling. And the application will be due by November 20th, taken to technical review by December 8th. As Reese shared, hopefully get some grants for your review on the December meeting.
Given this is a new program, how do we advertise to the world that this grant is available and get a great pool of applicants for?
Sure. So we have the list of possible eligible entities is there. And I have that, I have a personal list of all of those potential applicants in my email. All the utilities and grid operators and so forth. And then Reese suggested the Secretary of State as a mailing list as well. So,
Great.
so that's our approach.
I've also asked the Lignite Energy Council, they're doing their annual meeting today tomorrow. So they are going to announce this at their annual meeting today as well as tomorrow.
Perfect. And then is there anything we can do? I mean, we know it has to happen here, but is there anything with MISO or SPP where they could, or is every state doing one of these?
Every state.
Every state is? Okay.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion, and a second. Comments or questions? Call for the vote.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Attorney General?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes. Motion carries. Well, good luck on it. Good process.
Yeah.
Remind us the size of the grant.
With the state match, it's 8.6 million.
You have to be awarded to, can you decide multiple people or is it one winner?
It's actually quite flexible. The DOE people that we're working with, this is over a two-year grant. We can award it all in one. We can award it all this round. We can hold and award, in multiple rounds. So 8.6 million sounds like a lot of money to me personally, but to a utility, we're not talking big projects.
Yep.
So.
Great. All right. Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully gain you a little time, Justin.
1 minute.
1 minute.
Thank you.
Welcome, Justin.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Reese. Hopefully I won't take too much time here. In your packet, you have a draft letter. We spoke last time I was in front of the commission regarding the Bison Express project that has now officially gone to FERC. Just a reminder of the project itself. That is the Bison reversal interconnecting to two other systems on its way down to the Cheyenne hub where it will interconnect with additional pipes. At that last meeting, it was not public yet about how the June open season went. At that time, 430,000 decatherms. So you can think of that as roughly 400 million cubic feet of gas was offered. In that open season, only 300,000 of it was subscribed during that open season process. I'll dive into that here next of what they're doing. Again, this is now finally coming out publicly through the FERC process. So it was two shippers, Hess and One Oak were the two that had signed up for capacity. That was through a sister application process with Wyoming Interstate Company, WIC. WIC will take all the full 300 capacity, and they're going to manage those 2 anchor shippers and all the day-to-day operations. But the meat of it is this $555 million project that TC is pushing forward with. You can see where the cost is coming in are those 3 compressor stations. And so they're going to replace, those are older units. The entire northern border system has older units. I think the youngest one is 28 years and the oldest unit being replaced is over 40 years old. So it was timely that through this process, they're going to replace compressors and add horsepower to meet the needs of this reversal project itself. You can see the breakdown there. That'll be important here in a moment. 347 million of that is just purely replacement horsepower due to the aging infrastructure. 208 million is what's being allocated for that expansion project for the Bakken gas down to Cheyenne. And when we look at the FERC process here going forward, the timelines for it, and I should have mentioned quickly, just this project as a whole, really, the first economic models run by TC was 2018. So you can start to appreciate a little bit of the time it's taken to garner up even those 2 anchor shippers to make this project a success. The open season processes, and now anticipation is that by Q3 of next year or early part of 2025 that they would get the approval that they're seeking, construction in 2025 for a Q1 2026 in service timeframe. The FERC process itself, you can see on this next slide, the anchor shippers at the top, who they are. These are all the contracts on northern border. There's been a number of participants that now have intervened in the FERC process. It doesn't tell us anything at this time whether or not they're going to oppose or support the project itself. Most of us are under the belief that those parties, since they are not part of the expansion, that they're largely likely concerned with the expansion costs on northern border and how that's going to get tied back into their existing rate structure. So keep the commission and staff up to date if there are any issues that may need additional support from this commission. But otherwise, I don't anticipate any opposition for the actual Bison reversal or that deliveries into Cheyenne. I think if there is going to be friction through the FERC process, it'll likely be how FERC will allow TC to allocate those replacement dollars and how they're going to wrap that into future rates for those shippers on northern border. So with that, I do have a clean copy of that letter. If the commission so choose.
So moved.
I'll get it filed.
Second.
A motion is second. In the letter, it references 1.1 million barrels of oil going to 1.8 by 2050 with increasing gas oil ratio. Do we think FERC is infected with the same anti-oil and gas fervor that the rest of the thing is, or because the timing of when the appointments are because the letter doesn't make a case that the natural gas industry has been the one that's been the the largest contributor to the U.S. being the biggest contributor to reducing CO2 in the world has been natural gas, as coming online in the last 20 years as a source. So is there a way to position our support of this as something that might be this works for us. Every one of us agree with this letter, but I'm trying to say we got to write a letter that agrees with the politics of the people that are approving it. If we thought about that, or is FERC sort of, at least right now, in their makeup, immune to some of this attack on oil and gas?
I don't know if that's a great question. I don't know if I've got a great answer at this time for it. I'd have to think a little bit. We are seeing a bit more time in the process for some oil and natural gas projects, just getting on agendas and the process moving forward. Whether I would describe it as anti-fossil fuels or what the scenario is, the reality is that things have been taking longer. They're still have been getting approval. It's just the process is getting stickier and more lengthy in time. I know the EERC has filed comments supporting, I know there'll be others, so even some of those thoughts, as I talk with other parties, we can wrap some of those in as concepts and for others that are thinking about what message would be best submitted to support.
One thing I was surprised about, there is no digging, there is no pipe being put in the ground. This is a matter of just switching out compressors, and it's going to take 2 years. This is definitely the bureaucracy at its worst, or its best, depending on how you want to look at it. Oh my God, you're just changing compressors. And it's going to take 2 years before we have this project going. But that's federal government for you. Thank you.
Great point, Commissioner. So anyway, I think the letter is strong. I am just questioning, could we make it even stronger in terms of, trying to achieve our objectives? But imagine the approval or not approval is not going to swing on a letter from another party in North Dakota when it's a federal regulatory decision. But I would be happy to approve this letter or anything even stronger if we think there's a better way to make our case going forward.
Yeah, and I'm open to how the commission would like to proceed, whether it was this or the deadline for comments is October 28th. Just for.
Would the commission be comfortable if we took one more crack at this thing
Yes.
and tried to
Yeah, that's fine.
strengthen it up a little bit? And then, Karen can circulate it back for approval, but directionally, right direction, and let's just see it. Let's take a look and see if there's something we can do to be, have our strongest level of support.
Yep.
For this, because if we don't solve the takeaway problem with this increasing, as we learned last month, when we've had a record gas production in North Dakota, if we don't solve the gas takeaway, it starts crunching our
Or
oil, which then crunches the revenue.
Okay, I'll rework it and.
And John and Ryan, I'm sure with all the work they've been doing on, all these other response to the Fed, they're all tuned up on what we might be able to add to this letter.
Okay.
Okay,
Perfect.
all right. We'll call for the vote. Are you okay? We've had a motion, but I'm modifying it. I'm suggesting a modification to be this letter or stronger.
This letter stronger is fine, because we're all going to have a chance to take a look at it and tweak it.
Second.
Okay, all right, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Attorney General?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I'll get to work
Thank
on
you,
that
Justin.
and circulate it back through.
We're now officially ahead of schedule. Thank you, Justin. Vance, Kathy, hello.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. We just have one item for today. It's the asking for approval on our fiscal year 2024 strategic plan, the public version. And as you remember, back in the early September meeting, we went through in quite a bit of detail the confidential version of our strategic plan. And just as a quick review, we separate our plan into 5 key objectives. Number 1, promote and support North Dakota agriculture, commerce, and industry. Number 2, identify and respond to emerging issues in the flour milling industry. Number 3, maximize North Dakota Mill's profit potential. Number 4, grow our customer base. And number 5, invest in our employees. And we do use our strategic plan throughout the year, every year, to stay focused on achieving the goals that we have set and have been put in place with the plan. Happy to answer any further questions you may have, and asking for your approval of our plan at this time.
So move.
Second.
A motion second. We'll call for the vote.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Attorney General?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes. So motion carried. Vance, Kathy, well, we got a couple minutes here. Just how's the construction coming? How'd fall harvest wrap up? How's everything in general looking this fall?
we're happy with the way the harvest wrapped up. I think both the spring wheat crop and the durum crop is just almost completely harvested. The quality that we've been seeing at the mill is similar to last year, and I think we are already, I think, on new crop 100%, and it's working well for us, working well for our customers. We'll be going through the durum transition here over the next couple of weeks. The feed storage project is progressing well. We have the scales actually going in and being installed now. Some of the equipment is being put in. We're pouring floors in the building. Some of the siding is going on. So making some good progress here, trying to get ahead of it and get the building closed up before the weather turns on us here, so we can continue to work all the way straight through the winter. But going well, busy, running hard. This is a busy time of year for us. So we're pleased with the way it's going so far this fiscal year.
Last time we spoke, you're in the middle of the vertical pour, and were they able to finish that without any major weather disruptions or work stoppage?
We did. The pour went very smooth, Governor. The bins are up. They're actually disassembling the stairway to go to the top and putting in the permanent stairway up through the building as we speak. So no weather interruptions on that pour. It happened smoothly and on schedule.
Great. Anything else that three of us should know?
No, just we have obviously finished the first quarter of the fiscal year. Don't have the final results in for September yet, but we have a very nice quarter coming. I think that you'll be very pleased with the results here as we get this final month of the quarter finished up.
Great. Well, never have to recover from a good start. So congrats on a good Q1. We'll look forward to seeing the numbers. Any other questions for Vance or Kathy? All right. Thanks for dialing in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Karen, anything else before us today?
Nothing else
Please.
from before the commission.
Okay, good. Well, we will, having concluded our agenda, we will adjourn. Thank you all, and thank you, commissioners.